ZOEY is too drunk for this dystopia. Chapter 16. The noodle bar was an upscale joint called Nagashi Somen that, according to the sign, was a replica of a famous restaurant in Kyoto. It was an open bar facing the street and sidewalk, backdropped by a 2-story tall hologram of a waterfall spilling over emerald hills. A single chef stood on the platform above the diners, making thin rice noodles and placing servings into one of 10 twisting stainless steel slides flowing with ice water, which would deliver them to one of the customers at the bar. Each patron was to snatch their lump of noodles from the slide, dunk them in a bowl of broth, and quickly eat them before the next portion of noodles came racing down. If you missed yours, they fell into a trough and were swept out of view, unless someone farther down the bar was able to snatch them. It was, in Zoe's opinion, one of the most stressful places to eat in the city. Lyra was waiting for them next to 2 empty stools. Wu must have slipped the chef a fair amount of cash to jump the line. This place never had empty seats, especially this close to lunchtime. Dee Dee took the other stool, though made no effort to pick up the chopsticks, and Zoe wasn't sure how she'd even do it with her non-working fingers. Wu stood behind them, watching for passing threats. As they situated themselves, Lyra said,
"Have you been here before? We only have 20 minutes to eat, and the chef sends down a serving of pink noodles to signal it's time to give up your seat. They have warabi mochi for dessert, where you can grab it and eat it on the sidewalk."
Her speech was a little hard for Zoe to understand, certain words turning into wet hisses and slurps by lips that struggled to form them. Zoe knew that Lyra had suffered a truly gruesome injury, and also knew that she had walked away with money to get repair work done by a top surgeon. She had thus assumed the woman would look fairly normal, with maybe some scars or wrinkles here and there. That was not the case. It appeared, in fact, that Lyra had not gotten any work done at all, or at least nothing that was intended to make her look like herself again. In the 3 seconds Zoe allowed herself to linger on the woman's face, she registered that her gorgeous red curls started halfway back from her scalp, the front half of her skull splotchy and bald. One eye was half open behind a drooping eyelid, the other a milky white ruin. She had a section of missing lip that exposed her teeth. The skin in between each of those features was wavy scar tissue, like a sculpture done by clumsy, shaky fingers. Rex had asserted that Lyra's gruesome injuries were a reflection of the ugliness inside her, but it occurred to Zoe that they were literally a manifestation of the ugliness inside Rex. This realization made it hard for Zoe to speak.
"Oh, that was yours,"
said Lyra, as a bundle of noodles went zipping down her slide, into the trough in front of the bar.
"They go fast. It's like you're swimming past because you're scared of being eaten."
Zoe unwrapped her chopsticks, but had absolutely no idea what to say. "Thank you. How have you been?" Stupid question, Zoe thought. Stupid.
"Good,"
replied Lyra, as she mopped up broth that leaked through the burned-out gap in her lips.
"Considering my mom moved to the city to help out while I was recovering."
"I'm sorry," said Zoe, "about what happened to you. Is there anything we can do?"
"Gigi says you talked to him this morning."
Zoe hesitated. They were in public, which meant they were on camera. How diplomatic would she have to be here? How diplomatic could she tolerate being? "Things are tense right now," said Zoe, as she stabbed her chopsticks at another speeding bundle of noodles, missing. He insists the whole incident was just a matter of him saying more innocuous stuff on camera, than his fans going nuts with it.
"That's his line, yeah."
Lyra snatched some noodles and dunked them in the broth.
"This broth they have here is incredible. Shukatsuyu. I'm probably saying it wrong. I couldn't quite say it even when I had my old lips."
She glanced over her shoulder at Wu.
"I have a question. If somebody came and attacked me right now, would your guy back there with the sword stop it? Or does he only stop it if they come for you?"
"I would stop it," answered Wu, not in my capacity as Zoe's personal security, but as a man in position to do something.
Interesting. How does a guy like you get into a job like this?
Wu smiled. Do you want the short version or the long?
You choose.
I joined the army, based on a promise that I would learn a marketable skill, which I believed would assuage my worried parents. I also held a secret belief that it would make me seem like more of a man to all of the girls back home, who, without exception, saw me only as friend material. I wound up getting sent to South Korea as part of the peacekeeping force there, once it became clear the mess in the north was going to spill over. The joke was that we were there to be the corpses they could show on the news to justify a full military intervention, but it was one of those jokes that was also true. I did, in fact, discover a lucrative skill, though it was not the one my parents were hoping for, or what any parent wants for their son, I suppose. Once I was out, I took a job as a bouncer at a club. I went viral on Blink for an altercation in which I subdued several men. The rest is very uninteresting history.
I doubt it's uninteresting,
said Lyra.
But I know we're short on time. One more question. Were the other soldiers weird about it? Like, were there racists who thought because your family is from China, you were a secret traitor or something?
Wu smiled. There was a very heavy push inside all branches of the military to try to root out that kind of thing. But yes, it was there. Some had identified me as an easy target for bullying, and had to be taught that their radar for detecting weakness was badly in need of calibration.
So you arrived already knowing how to fight?
Oh, yes.
Because that wasn't your first time running into that kind of bully.
There is a long and complicated history behind that statement. I can see from Zoe's face that she is eager to get to the point of your meeting, but in short, I learned quickly that the advantage of bullies isn't in their strength, but in what they are willing to do, being unafraid of consequences, or of breaking the rules. What they each discovered about me was not just that I knew where to strike a man to bring him to his knees, but that I was willing to deliver that strike. As I have grown older, I have become frightened of how much of an advantage that grants a man in this world. Lyra nodded.
Thank you for that. So,
she addressed Zoe,
our friend Rex, Dee went back and watched your discussion with him, said I needed to tell you my side. What happened was he made his video about how I was ruining his reputation, ruining his life, destroying his career, all that. He was actually crying, talking about the trauma I caused him by me telling people that I almost died during our session, and yet he got off on it, which was 100% true. So then his fans went about digging through every single word I had ever typed online, every single thing I have ever been caught saying on a camera, including conversations overheard in restaurants and department stores by strangers with blink cams. They mined the records for every bad joke or offensive comment, every burst of anger, until they could build a profile that made me look like a liar and a psychopath. Then they blasted that message over and over, that I was a toxic person who had set out to destroy Rex, that I was a predator, that I was trying to bully him into suicide, or get him arrested or killed, or trying to extract money. The fans whipped themselves into a frenzy, and so there were entire Blink groups devoted to nothing but fantasizing about my death by torture. They made digital animations of me getting gang raped. All of this within a week. That's how it took them to go from zero to crazy. Just pumping up that rage until someone was finally pushed to take action. It couldn't have ended any other way. And yes, of course, Rex had told them to back off, which he didn't.
Zoe said. Well, can we find the guy who did the actual attack? If nothing else, there's no way that freak should be walking around free.
They coordinated it as a group,
Answered Lyra, as another batch of noodles whizzed past Zoe like they were weeing their way down a slide at a water park.
They crowdfunded some money to buy a drone. They worked together to look up how to make the flammable goop and how to 3D print the spraying and ignition gadget. The crowd sourced their stalking, figured out when I left my apartment to get on the bus, pinpointing the exact right time to strike. He made several attempts before finally pulling it off. As for who actually took the controls on the day,
She shrugged.
the police couldn't pin it down and said they didn't hold out much hope they ever would. But does that matter?
It has to matter, because otherwise everybody just gets away with it. Rex can factually say that he didn't directly cause it or specifically order it. Each fan can say they only played one tiny part, that it all would have happened without their individual participation. At what point does somebody take responsibility?
I just don't think that's the world we live in. Why don't you just hold your chopsticks in the water? Then the noodles will run into them no matter what.
That feels like cheating.
It wouldn't if you knew what you were paying for this meal. I bet you don't even have to look at prices when you shop. It must be weird. Living in a world where suddenly everything is basically free.
You know what it's like? It's like if one day you went out to your yard and flapped your arms and just suddenly started flying and realized in that moment that everything you've been told about gravity is fake. I remember all the movies about miserable rich people I saw as a kid. And let me tell you, for the most part, they're having a really, really good time. There's a whole party scene here in the city that I mostly avoid, but it's all these rich kids competing with each other on who can throw the biggest and best. We're talking mountains of food from 5-star chefs, orgies on pleasure-boosting hallucinogens you've never heard of, decorations that turn the venue into a totally immersive environment, a space station or a Roman bathhouse, that kind of thing. If you knew how much sheer pleasure these people have in their lives, you'd go burn their mansions down. Lyra nodded.
I knew one of the high-end escorts who used to go to parties like that. And when I say high-end, I don't just mean she looks like a supermodel. I mean she looks like a supermodel and speaks 5 languages. She's funny, radiant. She said she doesn't even have sex with them. They just pay her to be there and light up the room. I don't know if that's less weird than what the rest of us do, or more.
Zoe caught some noodles, dunked them, and felt like an apex predator as she chewed. The broth was a wonder, 10 layers of flavor that would require a poem to describe. They both just ate for a moment, the bustle of the sidewalk behind them, Wu and Dee Dee no doubt drawing stares from tourists.
When it happened,
said Lyra, as she patted her chin dry,
I thought the drone had just sprayed something disgusting in my face. Raw eggs or maybe paint. There was this moment when I was like, oh, this is gross. I have it all in my hair. It's all sticky. I have to go back up and take a shower now. Then the drone made this weird sound, and I guess it was the sparks. It had like a little road flare or something. And the feeling was cold at first. Like I couldn't even tell what was happening. Then I couldn't breathe, you know? Like fire was taking all of my air. And then everything was pain. I swear I could feel it boiling in my eyes. The scream I let out was just a whistle, like a teapot. I couldn't hear myself doing it at the time. I only know because I've seen the video over and over from Rex's fans sending it to me.
Zoe stopped eating. Then, quietly, she said, "No, they can't just get away with this. The guys who did it. No. I'm sorry, I don't accept that."
They have, replied Lyra, and they will. You know what's weird? After that, it's not that my face changed, it's that the universe changed around me. The way people treat me. I instantly became invisible to society. Everyone quickly glances away, except for kids. Kids stare. The way men used to hold doors open for me, hold elevators, offer to help get things down from shelves at the grocery store. The ways they would constantly invent reasons to talk to me, to keep the conversation going long after it was over, has gone. Just like that. It's like my face. That was my whole humanity, my whole value to the society. I mean, I knew my face had value. Every woman knows. But you don't think of everyone on the planet suddenly deciding you're a totally different person, or not a person at all. My family treats me different. My doctor, the pastor at my church.
Lyra stated all of this matter-of-factly, without so much as a tremble in her voice. She paused as if expecting Zoe to have questions, but Zoe had become transfixed by the empty bit of counter in front of her.
I haven't spent the money from Rex. I gave a lot of it away. My mom has had a lot of debts, but I'm dipping into it more and more now. My body is the same, so I can still make money in the business, catering to a different customer base, you know? But I've tried to get regular jobs, waiting tables or front desk at one of the casinos. Absolutely not. You know they make you attach photos to those applications? You can't stick an old one on there either. They want a time-stamped full-body shot. You know, to make sure you haven't gotten fat since the last pic. And these are jobs that will require me to live with 5 roommates to make rent in a bad neighborhood here. But if I just live off of Rex's payoff money, then I'm what? A professional victim? I'm connected with him for the rest of my life?
I'm trying to ask myself what I'd do.
If it happened to you,
said Lyra,
your people would have snatched up Rex before the flames were even out, then fed him into a wood chipper feet first. And I know everyone eavesdropping on this conversation is waiting for me to ask you to do that. But how would these crazy fans react? What would they do to you? To me?
She took a sip of her tea, carefully using the intact side of her lips.
Afterward, he made little jokes about it, constantly. Subtle, like it was an inside thing among his fans.
Zoe turned to Dee Dee. I've been thinking this privately for a while now, but I realize I should say it to you. The restraint you have shown in not going after Rex is astonishing. Dee Dee didn't answer. I'm glad we could talk like this, said Zoe, turning back to Lyra. But what do you want me to do?
Dee Dee says you guys think he may have something to do with the 3 missing sex workers.
Do you? Lyra reached into her purse on the ground next to her stool. She brought out a loop of thin, black wire attached to a tiny box, like a buckle, with one end of the wire protruding from it, like you could pull it through and tighten the loop.
So, my session with Rex that started all of this, as soon as he got there, he put this around my neck. Feel this wire. It's incredibly strong. I don't know what it's made of. Then he touches this button on his phone and the loop constricts, choking me. It's still boxed here. There's tiny machinery that pulls it tight. I start panicking, trying to get it off. But it's like a garrote, you know? Like assassins use in the movies. That's how tight it is. I can't get my fingers under it. And he watches me flail around trying to pull this thing loose. Then he hits the button and it loosens itself. Then he does that a few more times until finally he leaves it tight, tells me I'm going to die. I black out. When I come to, he says it's all a joke, but then he says he's going to leave it around my neck forever, 24 hours a day. So if at some point he decides to choke me out, he'll just turn it on, and I'll never know when it's going to happen. He says if he turns it up all the way, it'll slice right through the skin, the tendons, the bones. I start screaming at him. I start crying. I beg him to get it off me. He laughs, says it was all a joke, and takes it off.
Did you tell your boss at the chalet? I thought their entire job was to keep stuff like that from happening.
I did, and they do keep a blacklist of banned customers. Anyone who's gotten abusive or demanded their money back, anything like that. I told the manager. He listened. Then nothing happened. So Rex keeps making appointments. I confront the manager about it. She finally tells me that Rex can't be banned because he's untouchable. He's a celebrity, all that.
Zoe groaned. And that's when you made your video.
Yeah, it was the only way to try to keep the others safe. Then all this happened.
She gestured to her ruined face.
And yeah, they finally banned him then, but...
She shrugged. And if they'd done a better job protecting you, this feud doesn't start and you don't get hurt. But they didn't want to lose the revenue.
My complaint wasn't the first either. They knew exactly what Rex was like, but the risk wasn't just in losing his business and in his ability to steer other business away. With his reviews, you know.
That's why you wanted to meet with me.
That's why I wanted to meet with just you, not your people. You're frustrated that it's hard to pin down the blame for something like this, that there was too many people involved from start to finish. But there was only one player in this game who has the power to step in and stop it before it started, and that's your company, your people. I'm not saying I don't blame Rex, I do. But he's got something broken in his brain. He can't stop, won't stop, until somebody stops him. Your people, on the other hand, made a rational choice not to step in, based purely on the bottom line. I don't know if you know this, but out here in the world, they don't talk about the suits. They talk about the suits and Zoe as two separate things. Because people believe you when you say you're different. That you came in from the outside. That you're not from the same world as Arthur's scary old henchman. So when I think about how much I hate your people, I try to keep you separate.
Zoe rubbed her eyes and put her elbows on the bar, watching another clump of noodles zip past. I feel like my head is going to explode. All I want is to find the three women, alive or dead. I want to find them and get them to safety, if that's still possible. I don't care about solving this convoluted mystery. We can work out who needs punishing after. I just want to help the three human beings who my company failed to protect. But every step I take in that direction, it's like, oh, here's several more layers of subterfuge and conflicting information. Meanwhile, my team keeps talking about what this means for the election in the future. But I just want to find the women.
If you're hungry, said Lyra, you better start snatching some of these. We're almost out of time. Plus, I think the chef is getting annoyed that you and Dee Dee are making a mockery of this whole operation. Just one more thing, then I'll let you go. There's always been rumors of that Rex goes on these sex tourism safaris. People like him have these countries pinned on a map. One rumor is that last year a teenage sex worker in Bali was beheaded, at a time when Rex would have been in a country. This is before the thing happened with me. Understand? So it's weird that prior to my thing, the rumor was that the beheading was done with a wire. But if you try to look up anything on it, you just hit a brick wall.
Lyra snatched a bundle of pink noodles from the slide, ate them, then began gathering up her purse.
I know you've been wanting to ask,
said Lyra, as she allowed the next customer to take her stool.
No, I haven't gotten reconstructive surgery yet. Maybe I will, eventually. Maybe I won't. But for right now, I want people to see me. All this press they put out about how Tabula Rasa is this fun, lawless playground. I want the tourists to see what that really looks like. Thanks for your time.
Dee Dee left with Lyra, and Wu hustled Zoe toward their next destination, trying to minimize the time spent on a crowded sidewalk. Do you have any thoughts? Asked Zoe as they moved briskly toward a tower on the next block. I have many. Are there any specific thoughts you're asking about? I don't know. About this case? How we're handling it? I think that if we were serious about solving this, we would be doing what the police would be doing if they had the manpower, knocking on doors, talking to the victim's neighbors, sifting through thousands of hours of blink footage to find the one lead that would get us closer to the truth. I thought that's what Bud and his minions were doing. His people don't have subpoena power. They're going around and offering wads of cash in hopes that somebody associated with the bad guy will flip. Until that happens, we're in a completely passive role, waiting to see how and when the third victim is shown off to the public. I hate that what we're dealing with here is ultimately just a show. It's all being doled out as fodder for the stream audiences to gulp down. If so, said Wu, then you agree with Will that we can predict the perpetrator's next move by simply asking what would draw maximum audience engagement. But what would... Pardon me, said a southern drawl from just ahead. I believe you and me have business to conduct. Zoe prayed that they weren't talking to her, but that particular prayer was almost never answered. She looked up to find a cowboy, an actual dude in full Old West garb, complete with leather vest, chaps, spurs, and a 6-gun in a holster slung low on his hips. But it wasn't quite right. The 10-gallon hat on his head was dark and patterned with stars and half-moons. He wore a deep purple cloak and a pair of glowing cowboy boots, boasting a pattern so complex that Zoe's brain couldn't quite take it in. Zoe groaned. Oh my god. Wu, failing to conceal how happy he was to be doing something other than lurking at the periphery of a meeting, said, Sir, you need to step aside. And Zoe sensed he was kind of hoping the guy wouldn't. I'm in pursuit of a bounty, but not for either of you, so you can relax. The bounty's for Mr. Aviv, but you, miss, are more likely to know his whereabouts than probably anyone, considering the two of you are having relations. I don't know where you heard that, and I don't know where he is, and I definitely don't have time for whatever high-noon showdown you have planned. No showdown is necessary, as long as you come with me, where we can have a private conversation about Mr. Aviv's whereabouts. She will not be doing that, said Wu, though if you insist on this course of action, perhaps we should move to a spot with fewer bystanders. No need to be concerned about bystanders if you comply. And if you are thinking about trying me, there's something I want to show you that you'll want to see. Are you ready? Look close. He was now holding his revolver. There had been no visible movement. His hand had been at his side, and now it was pointing the gun. It happened so fast that it hadn't registered to Wu's eyes either. When he belatedly realized what was happening, he made a move like he was about to push Zoe out of the way. But then the gun was back in the holster, in a fraction of a blur. Zoe asked, Did you seriously have implants installed that would just let you draw your gun faster? Think about all the things you could have done with that money. You could have gone to school, learned to be an engineer. This man, said Wu, will never be an engineer. You are, in effect, harboring a fugitive, said the cowboy. One who just tried to assassinate the entire family of a political figure. Mr. Aviv is a terrorist of the highest order, as is anyone who shields him from justice. I'm sorry, said Zoe. What's your name again? You can call me Pistol Wizard. Is there something else I can call you? That is my legal name. You had your name legally changed to Pistol Wizard. Are you trying to stall for time, miss? No, I just need a moment for that to sink in. Now, I know what you're thinking, the man said to Wu, so let me spell it out. You have many tools at your disposal you can deploy very quickly, thanks to trained hands and advanced technology. But I can draw and shoot fast enough that even if you're first, it won't matter. My bullet will be through your brain while your projectile is in midair. Do you dare risk it? Wu and the man stared each other down, and in the meantime, the one thing Zoe most didn't want to happen was happening. Curious spectators were forming a small crowd. Wu replied, You are projecting onto me the very doubts that circulate in your own mind. How much faith do you have in this technology? Enough to trust your life to it? I'm sure you have pulled off many quick draws in front of a mirror, but have you tested the accuracy when firing after a draw? At that speed, if the calculations are off by some tiny thousandths of a percentage point, firing just a millisecond too soon or too late, then the bullet goes into your toes, or the 20th floor of a skyscraper behind me. If some tiny patch of worn leather inside your holster offers 1% more friction on the draw than the system anticipated, then the gun could be seated improperly in your palm, the barrel pointed a few degrees to the right or left, killing Zoe or a passerby. And before you can notice the mistake incorrect, my weapons will be doing their work, denying you your second chance. You see, this is what you cannot replicate when doing dry runs at home or at the shooting range. The risk to yourself, the total and absolute faith in your tools. That can only be perfected by real experience of life and death encounters. Unfortunately, for both of us, I do have that experience. Zoe said, Guys, please, if this ends in violence, the only winners will be the rubberneckers who've gathered around us hoping to see some action. Whatever relationship you think I have with Aviv, and please note that I got dumped in the water right along with Damon and his people, it makes perfect sense that I wouldn't know where he is. Even if we were madly in love and carrying on a secret romance worthy of an opera, telling me his hiding spot would only make me a target, as demonstrated by what you're doing right now. So you're in a situation where you can either die for a completely worthless cause in pursuit of a lead that will not, in fact, get you any closer to your bounty, or you can shoot Wu, abduct me, then find out I don't have the information you need, right before my people unleash holy vengeance on you and the surrounding landscape. The only good outcome is you walking away. You are the one that has not thought this through, replied Pistol Wizard. For what reaction do you think I was expecting, if not the very one I am observing right now? It would be a poor hunter who recoils at the sound of the tiger's roar. Wu said, A hunter who finds himself on the receiving end of such a roar has already failed. In the name of fairness, I'll give you 5 seconds to stand down and comply. 1... Pistol Wizard collapsed to his knees, though Wu hadn't moved. The cowboy's hands were wrapped around his belly as if he'd been gut shot. Standing immediately behind him was the old woman in the gray trench coat and red wide-brimmed hat, the one who'd streamed the boxed iris crime scene earlier. She was pressing a folded umbrella into the small of his back. That will be quite enough of that nonsense, she said, withdrawing the umbrella from the groaning man. Wu nodded toward the umbrella. Is that rigged to fire a projectile? Or stun him with 50,000 volts of electricity? Neither. There was a wet, farty sound, and Pistol Wizard groaned as liquid feces filled his chaps. Though I do have those options available to me, she said. I'm afraid a woman of my age, dress, and profession makes quite the attractive target for muggers in this city, so I've taken steps to arm myself. Speaking of which, I would suggest you take this opportunity to relieve this man of his pistol while he is otherwise occupied. The bystanders recoiled as another round of explosive diarrhea emitted from the stricken cowboy warlock. Wu took a step forward as if to confiscate the gun from the kneeling, shitting gunslinger. Suddenly, the man's right hand once again blinked into position, from clutching his stewing guts to pointing a gun right in Wu's face. Only the hand did not contain a gun. Neither did the holster. The man looked skyward, as did Wu, as did ZOEY, as did the old woman. The six-gun was a tiny speck against the crystal blue sky and white clouds, soaring through the air like a departing rocket, until it vanished from their sight. "This isn't over!" shouted Pistol Wizard as he stumbled to his feet, his pant legs leaking liquid excrement like a malfunctioning espresso machine. He limped down the sidewalk, and somehow it was only then that ZOEY saw the vehicle he'd arrived on, a life-sized mechanical horse, built from sinew of black hydraulics and cables, and protected in key spots with gleaming white patches of armored skin. The man mounted the beast with tremendous effort, his boots leaving streaks of brown on its white flank. "Yah!" he shouted as he snatched the reins. ZOEY had expected the machine to gallop away and was kind of eager to see that. Instead, its legs remained stiff as it rolled quickly down the sidewalk on tiny wheels contained in its hooves. Some of the bystanders applauded. "Thank you, I think," said ZOEY to the old woman. "I didn't get your name?" The old woman was accompanied by her hovering little drone, which, ZOEY just now noticed, was wearing a little red hat, a tiny replica of its owner's. "The name is Margaret Mole. I investigate missing persons. I may have information for you, if there is somewhere private we can speak." Chapter 17. ZOEY was no more willing to follow the old woman to another location than she was the magic cowboy, but she offered to walk and talk on their way to ZOEY's next destination. That is, if the woman agreed to do it off-stream, which she did. She turned off her little hat-wearing camera drone and stuffed it in her handbag. "Where are we heading?" asked Margaret as they moved down the sidewalk. "To that tower over there," said ZOEY. "This is going to sound like an obnoxious boast, but that's the closest one with a landing pad, and my company helicopter is coming to pick me up. We're going to Catharsis, and traffic from the city to the festivals is a gauntlet of tribulation." Said building appeared from the outside to be a cylinder of glass surrounding a snowy cliffside. A hologram scrolling around the exterior branded it as Alpine Climb. "So are you doing this full-time? Going around and doing live crime scene commentary?" "Oh, no, just a retirement hobby," replied Margaret, while tapping her umbrella on the sidewalk like a cane. "The sponsorship deals you see folks like Charlie Chopra take to make themselves rich seem in such poor taste, considering the subject matter. They'll do live ad reads for drone delivery meals just moments after discussing a child's brutal assault." "A hobby. So you're doing it for your own enjoyment?" "Don't think I don't hear the disapproval in your voice, young lady. If it helps, I do not chase lurid details and undressed corpses. My beat is missing persons. I've assisted the police in solving more than 30 cases. "Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. That kind of makes me feel bad about how I spend my spare time. I want to ask how a person gets into something like that, but I have a feeling it's not a happy story." "If you're expecting me to say I had a beloved child kidnapped or murdered and swore to avenge victims everywhere, I have no such tale, thank God. I think most people's motivations can't be boiled down to something so straightforward. No, I just noticed a generation's talents and smarts were being wasted staring at distractions on various screens, and figured all of that time and energy could at least be focused on something useful. As for me, well, I think I just enjoy solving puzzles." "So you like outsmarting bad guys? You're not worried someone will come after you, like if they think you're getting too close?" Margaret paused for just a moment, and ZOEY sensed she'd received this as a threat. "Everyone dies," replied the older woman, "and everyone can die. If we allow that to dissuade us, evil wins before the game even starts." They stepped through the main doors of Alpine Climb and found themselves at the foot of a sheer cliff. The building was a hollow structure surrounding a 300-foot-tall artificial climbing wall disguised as natural rock, complete with artificial wind and snow. At the top was the Tabula Rasa Alpine Lodge, a fine dining restaurant offering dishes of elk, pheasant, goat cheese, and winter vegetables served with the finest and oldest seasoning known to humanity: hunger. Specifically, the hunger that comes from having burned a few thousand calories climbing your way up. Immediately, Wu directed Zoe toward a sign that said elevator. Margaret gazed upward.
Have you ever wondered what would happen to a society if it became totally impossible to discern fact from fiction?
After only brief consideration, Zoe said, Actually, I think we're living in it right now.
I mean, truly unable, to the point where evidence could be falsified so thoroughly that no human sense could detect a forgery, where lies could be created that are identical to the truth, down to the molecule, to the point that all of our forensics and experts would be helpless to determine what is real and what is false. What would people cling to when searching for truths?
They would probably do what they do now. They'd believe whatever they wanted to.
The technology that makes people strong and turns them into weapons like that strange man back there, some say that's the future. But it seems to me the next frontier, the true power, is in mastering these new perfect forms of deception. The power to throw a car with your bare hands isn't godlike. There are animals that can do it. The power to create your own reality, that is the power of a god. But you already know that, right?
They boarded a glass elevator designed to grant riders a view of the snowy climbing wall and the colorful specks that were the tourists inching their way up. Are you okay with heights? Asked Zoe as the doors closed. This ride can be, unpleasant otherwise.
I'm fine with elevators, replied Margaret, as long as they don't decide to suddenly malfunction in between floors.
Once the three of them were sealed inside and rising, Zoe said, If you're hinting that you think the sex butcher situation is all an elaborate hoax, we've already come to that conclusion. My problem is that tells us nothing about the condition of the victims. You know, they could be getting tortured, they could be dead. Whatever the thinking is behind the hoax, the big thing is that these women were in fact taken out of society, and their loved ones are very worried about them.
They should be, replied Margaret. The perpetrator has gone to great expense to make these women appear to be dead. If he were to have merely killed them, that would have been unnecessary. A real recording of the corpses would accomplish his goal, if his goal is public infamy. A psychopath who abducts women and fakes their deaths wants the public to stop looking for them, perhaps so that he can keep them for himself, to play with as his toys for as long as he wishes. Months, years, decades.
Zoe understood why this woman had a following. She could spin a chilling tale. That's as plausible as anything I've heard so far, said Zoe. But unless you have some idea who this psychopath is and where they live, it doesn't do much for us aside from inspiring my nightmares for the rest of my life.
It has not gone unnoticed how hands-on you've been in trying to find these women.
Well, thank you, but I don't seem to have accomplished much.
In such a large city, in which so many qualify as one kind of victim or another, you clearly have a vested interest. You were seen on 100 cameras when Iris turned up in that box. You had just come from a meeting with a prime suspect in full view of a busy street, as if the location had been chosen on purpose. Zoe and the suits, on the case.
Zoe felt like she was starting to detect some sarcasm. You think that's just for show? Because if there's something more I can be doing, tell me and I'll do it. Hell, I'll skip the music festival tonight. I'd rather be doing this than that.
It is an objective fact, Miss Ashe, that you do not take such a hands-on approach to solving all of your problems.
I'll admit right now, the fact that this is happening when things are at their absolute maximum tension in the city has ratcheted up the urgency. But I do want to find these women, and I want to find the guy who took them, if he exists. You can believe what you want about me, but I'm telling you the truth about that.
I believe you, but forgive me if I have doubts about your motives. You would be very motivated to resolve this if, say, something about your organization were to come to light if someone else found them first.
Zoe groaned, suddenly feeling like an idiot for letting this woman lure her in. Ah, here we go. So which conspiracy theory do you subscribe to? Is it the one the angel people were yelling about, claiming we sell women to murderers if they pay a secret fee? What's the evidence for that?
The evidence would be the testimony of the 3 women, if they are recovered, and a possible confession from the perpetrator if he is caught. I am curious, then, if your people find the victims and the abductor first, will you immediately announce that none survived?
So that's the theory you came to offer me. That we're not trying to save these women, but that we're trying to find and silence them? But because you have no proof, you told it to me so you could see my reaction. Well, here it is, I guess. The elevator abruptly jolted to a stop. There were no floors to get off on. The only stop was the restaurant, and they were nowhere close to the top.
Oh, drat, said Margaret. See? Elevators just hate me.
Wu immediately tensed up, presumably knowing he had to be ready to make the second move, because he couldn't make the first one against a little old lady. So how does this work? Asked Zoe. Do you have a gadget in your umbrella there that packs elevators? She doesn't need one, said Wu. Her comment outside was a signal to her followers to do it for her. She crowdsources her investigations, and her fans are happy to help her invade any systems that stand in her way. They were stuck about 2/3 of the way up, artificial snowflakes sticking to the glass wall of the elevator.
A flock of talented people dedicated to discovering the truth and delivering justice is a superpower all on its own, said Margaret. In a society that is quickly going mad, they may be the only thing keeping all of this from falling to pieces.
It sounds like another pack of vigilantes to me, replied Zoe. So let me ask you this. Within your group of talented fans, what's the mechanism for due process? You just watched me talk to a woman who got her face burned off by a pack of true believers who thought they were dispensing justice. Is there a process for changing your fans' minds once they've latched onto a target? They're smart enough to hack their way into a hotel elevator. Are they smart enough to know when they're wrong? Because I've seen where this road leads otherwise.
We will accept the truth. I consider myself to be a woman of faith, but what I worship is the truth. I believe that it's our only hope for the future, a movement that considers the truth sacred, that doesn't settle for comforting lies or entertaining illusions. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear from me.
And if you or your crowdsourced investigation decide otherwise, what do I have to fear from you, specifically?
I am no vigilante. If I determine that you are responsible for the deaths of these women, I will turn you over to the police and hand over all my information.
I'm impressed that you have that much faith in the police and prosecutors here, especially when you're counting on them to take on someone like me.
Well, that depends on who is in charge of the police a few days from now, doesn't it?
Ah, I guess I should have known it was going to come around to that. So we're just going to stay trapped on this elevator until I confess to something I didn't do?
Not at all. I assume building maintenance will have it working again in short order. But while I have you, my hope is to impress upon you how important it is that, should your people find the missing women alive, that they remain so until they can be interviewed by the authorities, just in case you had plans to the contrary.
Well then, you wasted your time because I don't. If we can find these women, I'm as eager as anyone to know what they have to say. If the finger points towards someone who works for me, or who is allied with me in some way, I promise I'll bring the hammer down on them harder than you or Tabula Rasa PD ever could. Margaret gave her a long look, as if studying Zoe's expression for signs of cracks in her performance. Behind them, Wu shifted, as if readying one of his many tools. Zoe had a vivid vision of a close-quarters fight that would shatter the elevator glass and send at least one of them tumbling to their death. Finally, the old woman nodded, and, on cue, the elevator jolted itself into motion. They soon arrived at the restaurant, where a pack of sweaty people in climbing gear were looking with disdain at everyone who had taken the easy way up. "We're headed for the roof," said Zoe. "Are you hungry? Have a meal of mountain resort food, on me. Tell the host to put it on our tab." "No, thank you. A heavy meal only leaves me drowsy for the rest of the day, and I suspect that I'm going to be very busy for the foreseeable future." "Well, suit yourself," said Zoe, as Wu hustled her toward an employees-only door that would take them to the roof. And thanks for shooting that cowboy with your poop umbrella." Echo was waiting by the helicopter, rooftop winds whipping around her clothes. She was wearing a split red tunic that hung to her knees over black leather pants. She spotted them and spread her hands like, "Where have you been?" Zoe said, "Sorry, we got accosted multiple times on our way back from the noodle joint." Echo pulled off her sunglasses. "I love how you think you can get confronted by an unstable, augmented wrongcock in public, and the rest of us won't know about it. We were all watching, Zoe. The whole thing, including the noodle meeting. We started taking bets on whether or not you'd catch any." They climbed on board, Wu in the pilot's seat. He wasn't flying it, the helicopter flew itself. Zoe and Echo were alone in the back. The engines whined to life, and the cabin leaned and rocked as the helicopter first lifted off, then swept down between two towers. Zoe hated when they did that. Actually, she hated helicopters in general, but never voiced the complaint. It was the kind of thing that sounded ridiculous to say out loud. "Did you bring my concert clothes?" "In the bag on the floor," said Echo. "Next to the restroom door back there. See it? Got your clothes, some headache medicine, that spray for your scalp. I tried to stick one of your cats in there, but I think it jumped out." Zoe leaned back against her seat and sighed. "Did you happen to stick any food in there? You mocked me for being bad at noodles, but I really am starving now." "Check the warming box. Maybe the helicopter elves have left you something." There was an insulated cabinet under a table in the center of the cabin. Zoe opened it to find a white paper bag with a small red and blue logo in the center. "Oh my God, is this what I think it is?" She checked. It was. 2 hot dogs from Costco. "Oh my God," said Zoe. "I'm gonna cry." "There are sodas in the refrigerator under the wet bar back there." "I love you. This is the first good thing that has ever happened to me. Ever in my life." Zoe unwrapped a hot dog and ate it in a manner that a piranha swarm would find indecent. Echo said, "What do you say we tell the helicopter to take us to Ibiza? We'll buy a nightclub and just never tell anybody where we went." "Yes, let's do it. Right now. Leave all this behind. Take me to a place where people are normal, where they do normal things and think normal thoughts. A place where I'll have normal problems, like flat tires and termites." "How long before you get sick of it, do you think? Of being a normal person again?" "Never. You don't understand. You chose this life. I was thrust into it." "You really think that?" "I don't know." Zoe ate in silence for a bit, watching the gleaming buildings drift by. After finishing the second hot dog, she said, "I have to make an accusation, and I'm not quite sure when to do it, or how, or who exactly to accuse." "What do you mean?" "Lyra said when she asked for Rex to be banned from booking appointments that the manager wouldn't do it, even after it became clear Rex was going to hurt somebody, even after there were rumors that he just straight up beheaded a girl in another country." "Clarence Crockett. That was the manager." "I thought Axolotl was the manager there, with all the wigs. That's who Will and I talked to at Chalet." "Axel was brought in after Clarence was fired, and he was fired for not banning Rex. He didn't run it up the chain of command. He made that decision himself." "But he wasn't fired until after the situation blew up and Lyra got burned." "That's right." Zoe thought for a moment, then had an idea that made her jolt in her seat. "Wait. This guy worked with all 3 women. He's a disgruntled employee. He managed sex workers. And his name is Clarence. How is he not sex butcher suspect number 1? "He totally was. Bud looked into him. The guy moved to Miami and took a job producing porn. He hasn't been back in the city since and appears to be speedrunning the rest of his life by spending it drunk and building up debts with the mob." Zoe sat back, deflated. Of course it wouldn't be that easy. I was about to ask why nobody told me about all of that, but every time I ask that question, somebody says it was brought up in a meeting where I wasn't paying attention, and it usually turns out they're right. You can't micromanage a company this size. It doesn't work like that. You think Lyra was the first sex worker to get hurt. Zoe rested her head against the window, letting the vibration of the engines massage her skull. She closed her eyes and, with them closed, asked, "Am I doing a good job?" "What? What do you mean?" "Just, in general, running things. I feel like nobody thinks they can be honest with me." "You think Will is afraid to tell you when you've screwed up?" "I know he is. Not because he's afraid of me, but because he thinks I'm too fragile. He filters everything, like I'm not strong enough to handle it." "Well, it's not exactly that." "What?" "It's just that... Okay, have you ever had a job where some really eager employee comes on board, but they're so eager that they can't stop questioning everything? You're trying to show them how to brew the coffee, and they're like, why don't we sell donuts? Why don't we put in more comfortable chairs for the customers? Why don't we get a bigger sign? Only imagine you had an employee who was like, why do people need coffee to stay awake? Why can't everybody just get the proper amount of sleep?" "I'm sorry, hold on. So everybody thinks I'm annoying because I ask questions like, are our businesses ruining lives? Or are we using our enormous influence to make society measurably worse? So before I came along, nobody asked those questions?" "It's not that. It's that you are still thinking of it like a game." "You don't think I take it seriously enough? I feel like I'm the only one who does." "No, that's not what I mean. How can I put this? When I was a kid, my dad forbid us from playing any video games. Not for the usual reasons, because they were addictive or a waste of time. He said games teach a really bad lesson, which is that every problem has a neat solution. You enter a room, there's a door. That means there must be a key that opens that door, and there's a sword in that room, and that must mean you'll need to kill the dragon later. But in real life, you don't get that. You think there's some perfect way for society to handle sex work, or policing, or just vice in general. That it's just a lock that needs the right key. The real world isn't like that. It's all just a bunch of trade-offs. If you legalize drugs, you get addicts in the park and ruined lives. If you do prohibition, you get jails packed with traffickers and black markets ruled by whoever is the best at murder. You're driving yourself crazy, asking where's the exact solution, as if the universe is presenting all of this as a series of obstacles to test you, when in reality, all you can do is manage the problems and minimize damage." Zoe sighed. "I don't know. I guess I always thought that when you got up to a certain level with the billionaires and politicians, that you find the people who are making everything bad, because at least then it means somebody knows what's going on. Guess what? All of the normal people down there, in those buildings, they now think that's us. We're almost out of the city. Last chance to have Wu take us to Ibiza. We can have somebody mail your mom and cats to us." No, they'd find me eventually. Chapter 18. The only thing that freaked Zoe out more than massive structures was massive crowds. Granted, she didn't like small crowds either, but huge New Year's in Times Square size crowds just seemed unnatural and out of control, like a swarm of locusts blotting out the sun. And when viewed from the sky, the Catharsis Music Festival was, to Zoe's eyes, an unholy abomination. The helicopter was taking a route around the periphery of the festival grounds. The sea of bodies stretching out into the horizon. Faint music could be heard within the aircraft, songs fading in and out as they flew from the audio of one stage to the next. The holographic giants undulated insane on platforms amid the writhing waves of humanity. The crowd was crawling up the bases of the many amplifier towers, the bravest and/or drunkest fans, assuming wrongly that if they fell, the revelers below would catch them. The campgrounds at the center of the stages were a sprawl of color, all of the thousands of tents and tarps. At the center of everything was the 200-foot-tall beehive structure. It was designed to look like it was actively oozing honey, and holographic ads and menus scrolled and danced around the exterior. The bees that swarmed in and out were delivery drones, ferrying drinks, snacks, and merch to anyone who ordered. There were no lines of customers. The drones would drop your order right into your hand wherever you happen to be on the festival grounds. The charge invisibly sucked from your credit card. "Who's on the stages?" asked Zoe, just to have something to say. Without consulting any notes, Echo said, "A Vampire Toilet, Jax and Joss, the Ginger Triangle, the Parker Sisters, Toenail Fungus, and the Fluffy Submarine Collective. That's just on the 6 main stages. There are smaller acts interspersed in the camping area, and unregistered acts are performing outside the gates and in the parking lots." "Have you memorized the whole schedule? Like you can name all the groups if asked? All 100 plus of them?"
"Unfortunately, yes. You see the angels? Down there at the main gate to the north?"
From the air, they were just white specks, but Zoe did see them, fluttering around over the heads of revelers streaming in and out of the festival. Echo said, "Security shoos them away. They come right back, urging the kids to swear off the fornication and pornography of modern music. You won't make them out from up here, but they've also got liberators interspersed through the campgrounds there in the center, inside the ring of stages. White robes, white masks, the whole bit. Unfortunately, once word got out that the festival was short on security staff, these people unofficially volunteered. They wander from tent to tent, ostensibly to make sure nobody's being sexually assaulted, but they break up anything that looks like sex, just in case." Zoe was stunned by this. At a music festival? How do the concert-goers not gang up on them and stuff them into trash cans?
"A big contingent of those fans down there agree with them. I mean, that's why this place is a flashpoint. One of the headliners tonight is Snowcloak, taking over all 3 stages on the west side. That's those stages over there. After them, it's the Pompeii Sisters and Zenquisition. Those are all pseudo-Christian acts beloved by straight-edge types. That whole side of the grounds over there, where the guys on the middle hologram platform are dressed like goats, that's the west half. Those will be all of your conservative kids tonight. They're making a big deal out of picking up all the trash on their side once it's done. That's where Damon is hoping to recruit a few thousand new voters."
"But those people are from all over. How many can even vote on Tuesday?"
"Not even 10%. But there's a reason you don't see Damon doing campaign ads about new zoning laws, or fixing the sewers, or addressing the school teacher shortage. Nothing is local. Everything is broad and universal. Ads about housewives scared of street crime, the youth getting sucked into their virtual reality games instead of learning useful skills, how it's terrible that restaurants need menus in 4 languages. He could be talking about Tabula Rasa or Chicago or Houston. His audience isn't the voters here. It's everybody, everywhere. Mayor is just his first step up the ladder, and you can guess why he picked our city to launch his political career."
Zoe said, "Because it has the most cameras." They landed on a pad surrounded by conspicuous security armed with what were clearly the scariest-looking guns they could find. Zoe, Wu, and Echo stepped off the aircraft and into the Artist's Retreat, or the trailer park as everyone called it. It was a fenced-off area to the south of the festival, where performers stayed in trailers that were nicer than any homes Zoe had even visited as a child. The trailers had to be assembled on site, as each was large enough that it had to be transported as at least 3 separate units. Within the retreat was an array of food and drink concessions for VIPs, some of which appeared to be entire upscale restaurants from downtown that had been reassembled as scaled-down food stands to serve the bands and also the various rich people who hung around and bask in the glow of celebrity. And everything these stands served, Zoe noted as she passed, was free. On the way, she spotted metal guitarist Guido Balls, folk singer Brenda Shams, and rapper Frank Williams. There were like 5 N's in that name. All just milling around with their drinks and sushi, laughing and exchanging small talk. You could build a utopia right here on Earth, Zoe thought, as long as the inhabitants were rich enough and surrounded by a tall enough fence. Zoe's mother was already here, somewhere. Zoe had texted from the helicopter to ask where she was, and all Zoe got back was a photo of her mother holding a champagne bottle, arm in arm with a man in a silk shirt and sunglasses who, after inquiring with Echo, Zoe learned was a famous Persian rapper named Biz. Melinda Ashe had always made friends quickly. Wu nodded toward the luxury trailers. We're supposed to meet everyone in the temp office. We're at the far end of this row. See the pink one? Shaped like a giant cat? Wait, really? I was joking when I suggested that. How much did that cost? You know what? Never mind. Tony Maiden, a 25-year-old country music star who'd sold something like 100 million records, walked past, carrying a tray of strawberries and cream that looked so amazing that Zoe felt an urge to steal it. Echo nodded in that direction. Those are Bajinheim strawberries, $700 each. Not for the tray, that's per strawberry. The best in the world. Is there anybody here you want to meet? You want any autographs? Pictures? Nah, that feels wrong. I think this spot is supposed to be an oasis from all of that. I already feel like I don't belong here. Oh my god, it's Monkey Sheriff! She had involuntarily reached out and grabbed Echo's arm, as if to steady herself. It wasn't the entirety of the punk folk act Monkey Sheriff, just lead singer Shrek Keenly and bassist Speedy Felch. The former had his long, wet hair wrapped up in a towel like he'd just gotten out of the shower. The latter was holding a churro-coated corn dog in each hand and alternately taking bites of each. The trailer park behind them looked like it had been towed out of an actual rural trailer park, including the standard bullet holes in the door. You go on ahead, said Zoe to Wu and Echo. I'm gonna go embarrass myself in front of those guys. Wu looked them over. Do you need me? No, go make sure our trailer isn't hiding in ambush. If I get murdered by Monkey Sheriff, then you'll all have a funny story to tell for the rest of your lives. They moved on, and Zoe went to approach the two men, urging herself to just bail out and turn around with each step. Shrek was looking at his phone, but Speedy was now eyeing Zoe suspiciously while chewing a corn dog, showing the trepidation of a public figure who suspects someone is about to demand something of them. Hi, guys. I'm not here to bother you. I just want to say I'm a huge fan. You running for mayor? Asked Shrek, who had barely glanced up from his phone to say it. Oh, no. A dude came by earlier, wanted a bunch of pictures, said he was going to be mayor. I was like, dude, I don't even live here. Yeah, it's a whole thing. I just wanted to say, I guess you get stuff like this all the time, but I got turned on to you guys, believe it or not, when somebody gave me one of your t-shirts, and I had a really hard time last summer. I actually went into a mental hospital for a bit, and your song, Why Go, just hit me like a, well, I just played it over and over. I don't know if that was based on somebody you knew or if it happened to you or even, but it meant a lot to me. And yeah, I know I'm rambling, but I just wanted to say that. Thank you for making it, I guess. Speedy, who was in the middle of biting off some of his right corn dog, said, It's a cover from the early 90s. Oh, okay, well, still, hope you guys enjoyed the festival. What do they call that? He pointed at Zoe. Call what? The way you done your hair, with the bald strip. Oh, that's actually the result of an accident. Or I guess it wasn't an accident. Somebody was trying to shoot me in the face with a heat ray and it skimmed over my scalp instead. Seen a couple chicks with hair like that in the crowd out there. Really? Huh. Well, hopefully not for the same reason. You shouldn't be photographed with that woman, said a voice from behind Zoe. If you can avoid it. She and her people will be in prison soon. Human trafficking, sexual assault, charity fraud. It was Leonidas Damon, approaching with his entourage. Zoe said, That's not true. None of that is true. Go look her up. Her name is ZOEY ASHE, with a Y at the end of the first name and an E after the second. Homeless children have been disappearing around this city for months. Yesterday, they found the DNA of a missing child in the meat from one of her factories. Search for Soylent Black. You'll fall down a rabbit hole. There are nasty people, and you don't want anyone to think you've associated with them when they all go down. Ignore him, said Zoe. This is one of those mayor guys. Shrek muttered something to Speedy, and they headed back inside their shot-up trailer. Zoe spun to face Damon. What is your thing with me? Are you obsessed with me? You keep specifically singling me out. Is this personal? It feels personal. Come with me to the wine fountain. That's not the name of a restaurant, by the way. It's an actual fountain of wine. I'm not going with you anywhere, and it probably has a lot of bugs in it. He motioned to his assistants, who obeyed the gesture by walking away. I'd like to make you an offer, said Leonidas, once it was just the two of them. Can we go somewhere and talk? The wine fountain is usually a good place because nobody goes there. They don't want to get wine splatters on their clothes. Do you have any idea how many times men say that to me? Trying to pry me away from my people so they can sell me on their investment opportunity, or fundraiser, or tell me they want to stab Will in the back? You're all testing my resolve, I guess. Not your resolve, no. That's not what we sense. He pointed at her. You know your money is dirty. You know your businesses are dirty. Yes, even now. And somewhere deep down, you want out. Damon was walking away from the monkey sheriff trailer as he spoke, and Zoe found herself following him. You're not going to sell me on joining up with you and becoming a fascist. If hating crime makes me a fascist, then we're living in a country full of fascists. Every concerned parent who fears for their child is one. Mine is one of the most universally popular messages in all of politics. You don't want to be tough on crime. You want to make it illegal to be a certain type of person. You literally said you want poor people to stop breeding. Not poor people, worthless people. See, rich liberals have this idealized image of the poor. They clutch their pearls at the thought that the world would be better off with fewer of them. You think it's mercy to let them be born incompetent and bumble their way through life, ruining the lives of who knows how many others, as opposed to them not being born at all? They had arrived at the wine fountain, a 20-foot-tall marble sculpture in the shape of several turtles stacked on top of one another, red wine cascading down like blood. At least one bird was trying to bathe in it. Have you ever actually visited a prison and talked to the inmates? Asked Leonidas. I have. I worked as a corrections guard for 7 years. That's how I got started as a streamer, showing what those animals do to each other inside. 3/4 of them are illiterate. They couldn't even have the conversation we're having right now. The whole concept of thinking through hypotheticals, calculating risk, using metaphor and logic, it's so far out of their league, you might as well ask a pig to fly a plane. These thugs can't even fill out the forms to get public aid. It's not even that they're evil. It's that their brains don't have the horsepower to process empathy. They're literally not human beings. And you think what you just said there passes your empathy test? Some humans cannot govern themselves, Miss Ashe. Some can. If the world was made up only of those people, we would not need laws or police. It's just biology. We're watching a war between genes to see which will be passed on and which are doomed to extinction. You know that's all this is, right? You and me, this conflict. It's a race to find out if the genes that create a preference for hedonism and deception win out against those geared toward organization and discipline. So, you think some humans are just natural lawbreakers? You like cats, right? You know your cats are man-made. They couldn't survive in the wild like that. They were specially bred to be pets, domesticated. It's the same as with our cattle, our chickens, our pigs. They had to be bred to obey, to stay in their pens, to pull the plow. Well, not too many thousands of years ago, humans had to be domesticated to live in cities. Before that, we were a bunch of nomadic tribes of bloodthirsty hunters. To get a population that can sit in cubicles and resolve conflict with words instead of clubs, we had to be domesticated. That occurred via selective breeding. That's why everything in biblical times came with the death penalty. They had to filter the savages out of the gene pool. It's fascinating to hear the difference between what you say from the podium and what you say now, when you know this is a no-camera zone. It wouldn't change a thing, because everyone already believes this, in private. Come on, if you go to the grocery store and see some fat single mom smoking cigarettes while her 8 filthy kids run around screaming, you don't get this feeling in the pit of your stomach that something has gone wrong? To be clear, in the picture you're trying to create in my brain, the woman isn't white, is she? I don't know how dumb you think I am. I know the press has made being dumb my whole thing, but even if I suffered severe brain damage, I'd still know that as a society, we don't have to pick between lawless chaos and a police state where roving packs of government goons purge the streets of the unclean. I don't want that. I want a world that's not necessary because the people naturally govern themselves. Until then, yes, the only way to keep order is to surveil and to punish. Every civilization has known that. What do you think religion is? Back in olden times, there were no forensics, no way to catch criminals, unless there happened to be a witness. So they made up universal, omniscient witnesses and told everyone they were secretly being watched at all times. It was the only way to make people with weak genes behave. Well, half of us have dropped religion, so we have to make the surveillance real, in the form of a police state. If you don't like it, then you have to get rid of the weak genes. You pick, one or the other, strong genes and weak laws, or weak genes and strong laws. And controlling which babies get born means controlling who has sex with who. So it's not just the sex workers you want to ban, it's all sex outside of the purpose of producing a superior race. Again, religions had those strict rules for a reason. Have you been to Salt Lake City? Have you seen how clean it is? How clean the people are? I've noticed how white it is. Is that what you mean? He just shrugged. My answer is no. I'm not switching my endorsement in favor of a dystopian hellscape. Alonzo may be corrupt, but we can work with corrupt. If you win, I'll do everything I can to stop you from going any further. And I do mean everything. Goodbye. ZOEY turned her back on Damon and his fountain of blood, heading toward her pink trailer. To her back, he said, "Your prankster is here, at the festival. If you talk to him, let him know something. My theory of justice cares only about intent, not results. He tried to drown my children, so I'm treating it like he has succeeded. His failure to accomplish his goal means nothing to me. What I do to him will send a message to the whole species forward. Here's what happens if you come after my family." Without turning, ZOEY said, "That's between you and him. Enjoy the festival. All the food from the stands has human meat in it, including the vegan dishes." ZOEY made her way back to her pink cat-shaped trailer, stepped inside, and was immediately hit with the annoyed glares of 5 sets of eyes. She thought the suits were about to fuss at her for keeping them waiting, then saw that they were standing over a 6th person, who was seated on a garish pink leather sofa. The amazing Aviv yelled, "ZOEY, you here? Your people are upset with me for sneaking in, but I couldn't wait outside. There are bad guys looking for me. Can I have a word with you alone?" Before ZOEY could answer, Will said, "We have a lot to do today." I know. She groaned and rubbed her eyes. "Aviv, I assume everyone introduced themselves. This is my bodyguard, Wu. That's Echo, Lane, Bud Billingsley, the infamous Will Blackwater, and Andre Knox." Andre asked, "Hold on, does the infamous label apply to both of us, or just Will?" "And this," said ZOEY to the suits, "is a man who apparently has a death wish. Can you guys all go outside while we have a word? I have to yell at him, and I don't want it to get awkward in front of everyone." No one moved. ZOEY said, "Please, we won't be long." Everyone started shuffling out. As she passed, Echo gave ZOEY a look like, "Really?" Once everyone was out, ZOEY closed the door behind them and spun to face the sofa. Aviv said, "Cool jacket." ZOEY was wearing a black leather biker jacket and jeans, her best attempt to fit in at a music festival. Aviv got up from the sofa and made like he was going to try to kiss her. She shoved him back. "No," she said. "Stop. I'm not a prop in your stupid election season stunt." She shrugged out of the jacket and angrily threw it on a nearby chair, like she was denying him the one thing he'd chosen to compliment. "Oh, come on," he said. "It's not like that. It's either that, or you've decided I represent, what, danger? Risk? Is that what gets you off?" She angrily removed his jacket. then angrily pulled off his shirt. He said, "Should we, lock that door?" "Shut up," replied Zoe, as she angrily pulled off her black knee-length boots, then unzipped and pushed down her jeans. "Do you have any idea what would happen to you if you were caught in here? Do you have any idea how many people packed within the surrounding 4 square miles want to tear you to pieces? Is that what turns you on?" By the time she finished saying that, their clothes were on the floor, and Aviv seemed incapable of answering. 20 minutes later, Zoe was staring at the ceiling of the trailer's cramped but still bigger than her old bedroom, and Aviv was saying, "I'll swear I didn't come here to do that." "Why are you here? At the festival, I mean. Are you planning a stunt?" "I had tickets. All access pass. I wanted to see you." "So you did come here to do this?" "You can get anyone you want, girl or boy. Was it really so amazing last time that you had to come back to me?" "Yes, but just to talk, I'll swear." "I would ask how you got in here unnoticed, but the more important question is, what's your plan for getting out? Do you even have one?" He sat up. "Before we talk business, I want to ask, was that good for you? Just now? Just now? Normally I can last longer." "It lasted exactly as long as I wanted it to last." "This may seem like a strange question," he said as he pulled on his pants. "But have you had, like, classes in this? In Kama Sutra stuff?" "Maybe you've just been screwing beautiful, boring women up till now. Get dressed." "Oh, I feel like I'm getting mixed messages here." "It's not complicated, Aviv. I know you're bad for me, but the hungry, grunting pig monster that lives inside me doesn't care. It's in charge of my diet, too. It feeds on vice and poops regret." "Oof." "And you're changing the subject," she said as she sat up and looked for her bra. "Tell me your plan. Your whole plan. We need to be on the same page, or people can literally die. This trailer's parked next to a powder keg. 250,000 kids out there who've decided this music festival is the front line of a culture war. This isn't a joke. It's serious." "What if I told you I think jokes are very serious business? This election's already ridiculous. All I'm doing is pointing it out." "Well, your serious joke is going to get Leonidas Damon elected." "If I'm working in his favor, why is he the only candidate who wants me dead?" "You can't judge your life by whether or not you're making the right people mad," she said as she headed for the bathroom. "If you didn't sneak in just so we could hook up again, why are you here?" "Well, I thought I would have some information for you, but it hasn't come through yet." "What information?" she asked through the closed bathroom door. "I'll tell you when it comes through. There's no point until then." "Uh-huh. And this isn't all just part of the setup for whatever you have planned?" "I promise I don't have any stunts planned for tonight." "Tomorrow?" "No. No stunts." "The day after? Election day?" He paused. "My election day shenanigans are no more dangerous or chaotic than what the candidates themselves are doing." "Aviv." She emerged from the bathroom and tried to look stern as she dressed, which actually wasn't easy, considering the contortions that were required to stuff herself into the jeans. "No chaos," he said. "I promise. I mean, I won't do anything to stop people from voting. I want people to vote. I just wish they didn't have to pick between these 2 clowns." "I have to go. We have to prepare for the most stressful thing I've ever done in my entire life, and that includes the several times I've almost died. How are you getting out of here?" "Leave me. I'll slip out at an opportune time, after the sun goes down." "The drones out there can see in the dark." "Zoe, I've been evading authority figures for as long as I've been able to walk. I have a team I can reach out to for help. I'll be just fine." "So you slip out, and then what? You sneak your way out of the festival, past hundreds of security and thousands of people who hate you?" "Nope. I'm going to stay and watch the shows. When will I see you again?" "Never, if you get murdered by vigilantes." "I'm serious. We should have a normal date sometime." Zoe was pulling on her boots. "What would that even look like between somebody like you and somebody like me?" "Honestly, whatever we want. We could take a jet to Paris and eat the finest pastry in the world for breakfast, fly to Brussels for lunch, Milan for dinner, Berlin for drinks at a club." Can we order a bunch of cheap Chinese food and eat it in my bedroom while watching some old, dumb romantic comedy? Sure. Zoe scoffed and shook her head. Aviv said, What? You would be bored to tears. The moment all this nonsense is over, the moment the danger passes, you'll start browsing for the next thing that gets your heart racing. I've looked around at your social media. I'm not exactly your type. Men don't know their type until they put their hands on it. Yeah, I'm still waiting to get hit with a punchline at some point. See? This is what I'm talking about. You seem to live in this paradox where any guy who shows open interest in you is disqualifying himself. Like there must be something wrong with him. Don't you see how crazy that is? I think if you had met me 2 years ago, with me making coffee behind a counter and you on your way to your next big publicity thing, maybe you'd have thought, wow, nice boobs, if that. Then you'd have walked out and never thought about me again. So, congratulations, you're up here with the famous people now. And I am saying with 100% sincerity, with no subterfuge, that watching you stand up to these goons day after day, the monsters in the suits, is the sexiest goddamned thing I've ever seen. I've heard that one before too. And that feeling lasts right up until the man saying it is the one I'm standing up to. Listen, if you get yourself in trouble, if you get caught because you didn't bother to get out of town in time, don't expect me to risk myself or my people to help you. I'm telling you in advance. Lay low or get out. Or both. This isn't a game. If you insist on screwing around, I can't help you. Stop. Well, I'm getting turned on again. Zoe found Andre waiting for her outside the trailer, alone. Before she could ask, he said, They all took the tunnel to the green room. Alonzo was there. Wait, he is? Andre took off walking in the direction of what was, apparently, the next meeting. I got what information I could, said Zoe, weakly maintaining the fiction that she and Aviv had spent their time together in a tense interrogation. Aviv doesn't have any stunts lined up for the festival. He also says he isn't planning anything outrageous for the election. He doesn't want to mess up the voting. Andre glanced back at the trailer. Is he still in there? He'll sneak out at some point. I've got to say, him just being here feels like a stunt all its own. I could say the same about Alonzo. This wasn't planned, was it? No, but I suppose it was inevitable when he heard the other guy was coming. Is this meeting going to be us trying to convince Alonzo to leave? Damon supporters are trashing his offices and burning his campaign signs. What kind of chaos is the presence of the man himself going to trigger? Andre seemed to be bracing himself to deliver bad news. Well, I was going to let him tell you, but Alonzo wants the two of you to take the stage together. What? No, that throws everything off. It took me months to mentally prepare myself for this. The Sunday night onstage appearance had always been her father's tradition. For the locals and out-of-towners alike, the message was clear. I am the guy who keeps this city fun. If I go away, the party goes dark. Zoe had technically been in charge of the company during last year's festival, but she'd only been in the position for a few months at the time. When Will had told her that one of her obligations was a short speech in front of a couple 100,000 people, she had refused even before he'd finished his sentence. This year, he made a convincing case that skipping it wasn't an option. If she wanted to be the face of the company, that is, to convince observers that the company wasn't being secretly run by a shady cabal of criminals, stuff like this was part of it. They entered the tunnel from the trailer park to Green Room East, a temporary building positioned behind the trio of stages. The 3 west stages had their own, which was inexplicably called Green Room 2. The tunnel was not underground. It was a clear polymer tube that Zoe thought looked like a human-sized version of something you'd find in a hamster cage, suspended 10 feet off the ground. It was intended to keep them separated from unruly fans as they walked the half-mile or so north toward the infield campgrounds. The tube had been cleverly designed with a slick exterior that would make it impossible for anyone to climb on it. So there were only about 200 revelers sitting atop it as Zoe walked past beneath them. A couple of people slapped the sides and said her name as she passed, but in general, she wasn't nearly as famous as any of the actual bands. To most of the fans perched on the tunnel, she probably just appeared to be somebody's assistant or publicist. As they approached their destination, Andre said, "You all right?" "Yeah, why?" You seem uncomfortable is all. Didn't know if it was something you wanted to talk about. You don't want to hear it. No, I'm all ears. As I walk, it's occurring to me that I could have done a better job cleaning up back there. Andre had no reply, presumably trying to puzzle through what she meant. She asked, "Is this tunnel thing soundproof? Can we talk in here?" I just say what I want. I can't live like that. Paranoid somebody is picking me up on camera or a long-range mic from a drone. What kind of life is that? Do you really want Alonzo as mayor, or do you just want Damon to lose? Andre thought about it. Honestly, I liked it best when the position was vacant. The various officials had to put their heads together and hammer out decisions. But I think you can make an honest case that Alonzo knows the city on a ground level better than anybody. That charity housing you built in Hambrat, you could show up there tomorrow and none of the tenants would know your face. But I can guarantee they all know Alonzo. That has to count for something. She stayed silent for several steps, then asked, "Have you ever been the victim of a crime?" Andre raised an eyebrow. "Oh, yeah. We grew up in a not great neighborhood. Bad enough that my dad moved us out of there when I was still in high school. So, you know what it's like, right? I mean, back when you were helpless, not now, when you're able to do something about it. Me, my sisters, my friends, all of us. Our apartment got broken into 4 times in 1 year. Our various trailers, apartments, and cars got broken into more times than I can count," said Zoe. "And let me tell you, when you're a girl, it's a whole different feeling, seeing how easy it is for somebody to get in. They're usually stealing to sell stuff for drugs, but, there was never a guarantee it'd end there. And all the talk about how you can't blame these guys, that it's their addiction, mental illness, their upbringing. In that moment, when you come home from work exhausted and see the glass on the floor, see they've stolen the tablet you saved up for 6 months to buy, knowing it's now in some pawn shop in another state. I used to have a fantasy that they'd try to come when one of my mom's boyfriends was there. These were always rough guys. She had a type. And I'd think, it'd be worth it to have them break in, so that we could catch them breaking in, crack their skulls. All that talk about bad childhoods and systemic oppression feels pretty ivory tower in that moment. You leaning toward Leonidas now? I'm saying I understand his appeal. People are trying to raise kids here. And when you're talking about crime, it's not Robin Hood stuff. You burgle in one of the fancy gated communities around here and you'll get hunted down. But the flimsy barracks they throw together for the migrant laborers, the apartments that don't come with real security, they're easy picking. It's the poor robbing the poor. So it's a little hard to hear Alonzo portray himself as the hero of the lower classes when his attitude toward crime seems to boil down to, look, that's the cost of freedom. It's either this or brutal dictator. They had arrived at the door of the green room, which was being guarded by a very serious man in a suit and sunglasses. "If what you're trying to say," said Andre, "is that the poor people here are being forced to pick their poison, either live terrified of a creep crawling through their window, or be terrified of a jackboot knocking their teeth out for no reason, well, that's the same choice the people at the bottom have been stuck with for several thousand years." I feel like every discussion I have about this just goes in circles. And now you know why the very first human cities all had a common ingredient that made them work. We wouldn't have a civilization without it. The law? Alcohol. He nodded to the guard and opened the door. "After you." Zoe passed a K-pop band in blinking plaid suits, who were joking to each other about something in their native language. A harried assistant nearby seemed to be frantically trying to repair some problem with a wig. They passed a sofa on which sat the hip-hop duo Brinks and Gumbo, both looking at their phones and ignoring each other. When Zoe passed, they each flicked their eyes up at her, again with that furtive expression of a celebrity quickly checking to see if the approaching suit was about to ask something of them. Zoe wondered how often she had that look herself. She was hustled to a smaller room, packed with boxes of various liquor and junk food that had presumably been listed on various acts, concert writers. Will, Echo, and Bud seemed to be in the immediate aftermath of a somewhat tense discussion. Zoe said, "I made it." To Bud, she said, "Echo claims she has the whole band list memorized, off the top of her head." "It's true. Made her run through the list. It's impressive. Echo took a deep breath.
On the East Stage, it's Clothes Clown Clones, God's Thon, Dog Juggling, Sanvi Scenes All Jug Band, Do Re Meat, Sound Turd, 10-Gallon Italian, Yak Jesus, Tiny Little Rat Farts, Lance Dance Pants, Funeral Giggles, Cello Mold, Dick Masters and the Dick Masters, Turdvana, the Jesse Stank Bones, Foont, Beef Slap, Live Tuna Sandwich, Beard Cannon, Stinky Geyser, Cornhole Brunch, Beak Soup, DJ Teats, Steve Books and the Readers, Help Us Dolphins, Tangerine Boris and His Ladies, Screaming Morons V's, The Collective Evil of All Human Society, Cameo 2, Mitch's Vibrating Tits, A Query Yum, Tennessee Layover, Normal Doug, The Trustworthy Yon MFs, The Four Horsemen Trio, Snuffle Truck, Richest Bitches, Summer Camp Fingerbane.
That's good enough, interrupted Zoe. I've got the idea. Will asked Andre, Did you tell her? Zoe answered for him. That Alonzo wants to turn my festival speech into a joint campaign event? The answer is no. From the door behind her, Alonzo's booming voice said, You're not even going to give me a chance to state my case? She turned to face him. If you want to go through the crowd recruiting voters like Damon, be my guest. But my remarks aren't a political appearance. It's one thing for me to tell people I'm voting for you, or to donate to your campaign. It's another to make it look like I work for your campaign. Or, and this is how it's going to play in the press, like you work for me. Like you're a puppet of my devious organized crime family. I agreed that's how it would look if I took the stage with these hooligans, said Alonzo, sweeping his hand toward Will and the rest of the suits. But you, by yourself, in your little biker jacket, the message I see is, it's a new day in Tabula Rasa, just like the name says. And I won't even say anything political. I'll just tell people to enjoy the show, same as you. No, you've had weeks to ask for this, and you're springing it on me backstage? All the plans have been made. We have a whole carefully orchestrated security apparatus in place. I mean, why now? Will said, You can guess, if you think about it for a few seconds. Zoe said, Leonidas Damon is doing it. Alonzo nodded. Snowcloak is bringing him on stage on the west side, just after they do their opening prayer. Just as a side note, I've got to say that's the perfect name for what has to be the whitest band name that has ever existed. Do we know what Damon's going to say? Echo said, We don't, but it's easy to predict. He's going to go up there and repeat his accusation that we all tried to have him killed at the pirate debate. He's going to try to whip his people into a frenzy, to get a riot going. So, even if he causes the riot, it works in his favor because his official position is anti-riot. How is that fair? Andre said, Tyrants have been using that playbook for longer than we've had words to describe it. How about this? Offered Alonzo. I go up with Zoe and make a call for peace. Now, I don't tell people to vote for me. I don't even mention there's an election. I go up, thank the organizers for putting on this beautiful event, then tell everyone to please cool it and to take the anger to the voting booth on Tuesday and keep catharsis peaceful, etc., etc. Zoe looked to Wu. How does it change the security equation if Alonzo is on stage with me? Well, this is what we were supposed to go over last night. Your angel drones won't chuck blood bombs at you. They can't get in. But there are Liberator activists on the grounds. They won't have bags of blood unless they, I don't know, puncture a vein and fill them on the spot. But if they do that, honestly, they'll have earned it. If one person tries to rush the stage, they'll be tackled by security before they reach you. That's why you're not going to get close to the edge. There's a piece of yellow tape on the stage. Stand behind that. That all sounds really straightforward. But in the unlikely but always possible event that there is an actual assassination attempt with some kind of projectile weapon, you will go flat. The stage has a slight incline that will make you invisible from wherever the hypothetical shooter is, unless they're 10 feet tall. There are no known weapons on the grounds. Everyone is scanned when they enter, but of course a dedicated assassin could have something custom made, or 20 squirrels could each bring in individual pieces that can be assembled on site. Use your imagination. He didn't mean literal squirrels. Some festival goers would arrive at the grounds weeks in advance and bury contraband that wouldn't otherwise be allowed through the gates, with the intention of digging it up later. Throughout the festival, you'd find kids on their hands and knees, digging at any patch of loose soil, hoping to find the booze, drugs, etc., that they or someone else had squirreled away. Zoe nodded. Stay behind the line. Go flat if someone shoots. Got it. So, how does that change if Alonzo is up there with me? Well, I don't have Echo's sophisticated model in front of me, but I'd say with 2 targets on stage, that approximately doubles the chance somebody will try something. But it cuts the chances of harm to Zoe in half, said Alonzo, since they have 2 targets to pick from, and I have easily twice Zoe's mass. From the front, anyway, so that reduces it to 33%. Hell, that's safer than flying. Zoe looked to Will. What would you do? The better question is, what would Arthur do? I know you don't like asking that question, but his instincts for politics were better than mine, and I think Arthur would let Alonzo on stage, but would make it very clear beforehand that Alonzo was deeply, deeply in his debt for doing so, and then he'd remind Alonzo of that fact once every 48 hours or so for as long as he served as mayor. Zoe turned to Wu again. Does this make your life harder? I feel like you complain about me when you're hanging around other bodyguards. He pondered it, appearing like he was searching for a plausible reason to refuse. If there are no calls to action to the crowd that they could interpret as permission to rush the stage, then no, we should be all right. Zoe sighed and said, Fine, and even before finishing that single syllable, knew it was a mistake. Chapter 19. Zoe and Bud had huddled in the quietest spot they could find, which turned out to be a control room under the center east stage that looked like the cavernous flight deck of an intergalactic starship. On some level, Zoe had known there had to be a place where experts ran the pyrotechnics and holograms and stuff. What she had not realized, until Bud explained it, was that the entire show was not just planned, but recorded in advance. Each act, even the lo-fi folk groups, had a music director and a live programmer stationed in this room to fill in background vocals and instrumental tracks during the performance. All live singing was tuned and filtered through the mic before it emerged from the amps. Most of what you heard on stage, regardless of the act or genre, was a pre-recorded and pre-scheduled program pumped out from this room, the band just playing along via cues from their earpieces. Was the whole world nothing but orchestrated lies? There was a tiny soundproof booth just off the control room, and the 2 of them sat knees to knees in there, Zoe looking at the padded walls around them and trying not to think of a coffin. The control room people aren't going to get mad at us for intruding? Nah, said Bud. I know all those guys. How do you do it? How do you just instantly connect with people? Will said he once saw you walk up to a cop who was in the act of arresting a homeless man, and both of them turned and greeted you by name. Well, that's the key. Knowing that everybody's different in the details, but the same at the core. Every human being has one big gaping weakness. It's usually one of 2 things. A sucking hole at the center called need, or something they've desperately latched onto to fill that need. Either way, their entire world and personality, all their posturing and bluster, it's all revolving around some central weakness they're trying to cover up. So you're just looking for weak points to exploit, like a predator looks at a herd of elk? Ah, no, it don't have to be like that at all. When you see a puppy or a wounded bird, does their weakness make you want to squish them? No, that's when you love them the most. When you see even the worst monster among us and realize they're just a needy mammal at heart, it's hard to see anyone as truly bad. Understanding this just takes away the fear of talking to them, that's all. Well, it's kind of hard for me to see the frail humanity in the billionaires who kill so they can add 2 pennies to their stock price. Would you trade places with them? Asked Bud. Put their hard heart inside you to replace yours? No. So you do pity them, because you don't want to be them, even for their money and power. You wouldn't want to become an unfeeling wretch. To be that cut off from your basic humanity has to be a hell all its own. Well, I would ask you what my big insecurity is, but everybody in the world knows it. Oh, really? Yeah, I worry that I'm not cut out for this world of cutthroat serpents. You think so? I reckon you're more worried that you are cut out for it. So, my speech, she said, rapidly changing the subject. I'll say hello, introduce Alonzo. He'll say whatever he has to say. Then, what? Is this where you make up a joke for me to tell? Just to be clear now, I've never made up a joke in my life. All these jokes are older than the hills. Some of them I heard from my grandpa. He probably heard them from his. The skill is in delivery. That and matching joke to audience. Can I make a joke about that thing you just said? How everyone I'm forced to meet with every day is a hollow shell of inhumanity? The safest bet is to poke fun at yourself. Talk about how your life is a mess. See, that's what soothes the anxiety inside people, hearing that others have got it worse. Well, that should be easy, since it's true. I feel like as soon as I adjust to one part of this job, I'm constantly thrust into something new and strange, where I look like a crocodile trying to play a piano. If only we could transplant into you even half of the irrational confidence of your prankster friend. Oh God, don't get me started on Aviv. I swear, I can't tell if he's charming or just really tall. Does it matter? Asked Bud in an odd tone. I say, in our world, only one thing counts in romantic relationships, and that's trust. So, do you trust him? Not at all. Bud gave her a curious grin. You sure? It seems like you treat him like someone you trust. I hope not. Will said the most effective con is when you let the mark think they're in on it. For all I know, that's all Aviv is doing with me. I trick everybody else, but I'm letting you in on the game. Hell, you tell me if I should trust him. You're the only one who can read everybody. I think it's easy to assume males are all sly schemers, when most of us are clumsy oafs, falling on our rears and then trying to play it off like we did it on purpose. I think the most common mistake we make in dealing with people is in assuming that while our own feelings are a mess of contradictions, everybody else is operating with a clear agenda, and any inconsistencies must be due to some kind of ruse. Wait, are you encouraging me to start a serious relationship with this daredevil/prankster? I'd almost suspect you're saying this to me as a prank on Will. I'm, not so sure that Will wouldn't tell you the same thing. I mean, he wouldn't tell you. I'm saying if you could pry open his skull and see his real thoughts, that's what they'd be. I don't even know how to respond to that. Everything I learn about that man just makes him more inscrutable. I mean, what's Will's one glaring need or weakness or whatever? You, of all people, should know the answer to that one. What do you mean? You know what? I don't want to know. I'm just saying, we're all just people. And sometimes our actions make no sense because we're fighting a battle with needs we don't like or understand. If you're ever wondering how a man feels about you, remember that what he feels and what he wants to feel might be two different things. Sure. Okay, we keep getting off the subject. I need a joke for my speech that won't accidentally spark an outrage that helps Leo Damon win the election and have us all thrown into a labor camp. I do suppose that outcome would be less than ideal. Seriously though, what specifically happens to us if Damon wins? He can't really just put us into prison, right? I'm trying to imagine Will in an orange jumpsuit and it breaks my brain. Bud raised his eyebrows. You know Will's done time before, right? All of us have, including Echo. Arthur did too, a couple years. Zoe did not, in fact, know this. She leaned back against the padded wall of the booth. I don't think I can handle prison, Bud. Is that really what's at stake here? Maybe more than that. Whatever sentence gets handed down, a man like Damon would make sure the key players don't come out in one piece. Are you trying to give me a panic attack before I go on stage? You're on the high wire now, Zoe. Be honest with yourself. When you look down, sure you're scared, but maybe you're also a little excited? No, I'm not crazy. Women who like danger get called crazy. Men get called brave. Now, I can't give you relationship advice. Lord knows my personal life is a damn mess. But I'll say this. If you find a fella who sees you for what you are and doesn't go running for the hills, at least give him a chance. Zoe thought about it. When I first showed up here, when everybody just wanted to kill me, you were the first one to say anything positive. I'll never forget that. He shrugged. It's no credit to me, seeing what was obviously there. Alright, enough of that. Let's write up some brief remarks that won't precipitate disaster. The sun had set, and Zoe was standing just off stage with Alonzo while the Four Horsemen trio played yet another encore, the band having already gone 20 minutes over schedule. The music was deafening. The noise of the crowd was impossible. It was simply a sound on a scale Zoe couldn't comprehend. It was nothing that evolution had prepared the brain to process. A mass of voices that crashed across her like ocean waves. Then there were the individual voices in her ear, bugging her with details and reminders that sliced through the cacophony. The little earpieces canceled all other noise the moment someone spoke. This is how she would receive her instructions to go flat or run away in the event disaster struck. She noticed water bottles and other debris were being hurled at the stage, which was making her very nervous. She asked, "Did we discuss what I do if people throw junk at me? A bottle just barely missed that drummer's head." "There's a mechanism to repulse projectiles." Woo's voice replied in her ear. She was forced to rely on the earpiece despite the fact that the man was just 6 feet behind her. "There are vents with compressed air at the edge of the stage. Anything thrown, the jets blow it back to the crowd." "It doesn't look like it's working." "The band requested it be off. They encourage the projectiles. It will be turned on for you and Alonzo." The Four Horsemen trio finished their song and were now goofing around with the crowd, the shirtless lead singer grabbing water bottles and hurling them back at the audience. He found one bottle on the stage, half filled with a yellow liquid, picked it up, and said, "Who threw the piss?" The crowd laughed and cheered. Then he tipped it up and drank it. The crowd went wild. The lead guitarist walked off the stage past Zoe, the man absolutely drenched in sweat. When Zoe watched him head down off the stage, she noticed her mother had arrived at some point, looking pleasantly drunk, and giving Zoe a nervous thumbs up. A voice in Zoe's ear, Echoes, said, "Once they've all left the stage, give the audience a minute or two to calm down. Wu will run one more drone scan for anyone with a threatening posture, anyone who may be concealing a weapon or who seems to be planning something." Zoe felt her phone buzz with an incoming message, and pulled it just far enough from her pocket to check it. Aviv. Looked to the right, next to the nearest amp tower. In her ear, Will's voice said, "Stick to the script. Don't start doing crowd work. Don't improvise. Say what we planned. Smile, wave, walk off. Don't create a moment they can use against us." Zoe didn't bother replying to either of the men. Alonzo stepped up beside her, 2 assistants messing with his tie and pocket square, respectively. He waved them off and gave Zoe a sidelong glance. "Can you believe what nonsense this all is?" Again, despite being right next to her, she was getting him through the earpiece. The band had now all left the stage, aside from the drummer, who was out on the edge, looking for 2 fans to give his drumsticks to. He was crouching over a forest of grasping fingers. Zoe sighed. "I hate politics." Alonzo smiled. "So do I." "Yeah, but the difference is I'm not running for office. I don't get running on a platform of, this is all stupid. I mean, it is all stupid, but why can't we have actual expert politicians who know how to run things well?" The drummer chucked his drumsticks to the 2 prettiest girls he could find, then strode off the stage, bumping past Zoe. In her ear, Echo said, "Just stay where you are for the moment." "Look," said Alonzo, "what the citizens want couldn't be simpler. They want all evildoers to be instantly apprehended and punished, with perfect accuracy and no inconvenience to the innocent. They want jobs with good pay, flexibility, and low stress, but also want all products and services to be available instantly, at all hours, and dirt cheap. They want generous government infrastructure and benefits, but without paying taxes. In other words, they want the impossible, so what they get instead is a show." He gestured to the riggings and the lights above the stage. "Something they can follow like a sport, argue about with their buddies." In Zoe's ear, Echo said, "Give it another minute or so. We'll tell you when to go on. Wu says there are no obvious assassins in shooting range." "Thank you, Echo." To Alonzo, she said, "I just want a world where everyone's basic needs are met. That's not impossible. I'm not going to let you or anybody else make me feel like an idiot for wanting it." What's a basic need? Does it include a yearly vacation? A yacht? Your own car? To get your hair done at a stylist? What about sex? Are they entitled to that? Not if they can't find their own willing partner, no. But all that other stuff requires willing partners too. If everybody is entitled to a home, that means construction workers have to labor for weeks in the hot sun to build them. Why is that different from requiring someone to provide sex? For the same reason you'd probably sooner spend an entire year building a house in the sun than 5 minutes providing unwilling sex to a stranger. A message chimed, and ZOEY again checked her phone. Aviv, look for the yellow robot. That's me. She had no idea what that meant, and absolutely had no desire to deal with it at the moment. But not everyone agrees, said Alonzo. Go ask your goyles at Chalet if they'd prefer hard labor. At the end of the day, you have to let people choose their lives, for better or worse. Echo said, You're up. ZOEY took a deep breath and stepped forward, knowing that if she allowed herself to hesitate for even a moment, she'd just freeze in place. She went out onto the stage and felt her body respond the exact same way it had when she jumped into the freezing water during the shipwreck. A visceral convulsion that seemed to purge all the air from her system. Before her was a pulsing sea of humans that faded to a blur of people pixels that stretched out into the distance. She looked down at the first few rows below her, and there were the faces of individuals making actual eye contact. Most showed no sign of recognition. A general cheer went up from the crowd at her appearance, probably just a reflexive reaction to having something occurring on the stage. She thought she heard a ZOEY shouted somewhere out there, and the word cat. And then a roar went up, and that was for Alonzo, following her out. That cheer from the audience was a high like ZOEY had never felt in her life. Good Lord. She could feel that thunder of approval in her shoes, in her gut. The 5 sentences she was supposed to say, the script she'd memorized by repeating them over and over, utterly vanished from her mind. A voice in her ears said, take a step back, and she had no idea what it meant, then noticed she was beyond the scuffed strip of yellow tape they'd marked as the safe zone. Alonzo was waving, and, in general, seemed to be waiting for ZOEY to say her bit, which was supposed to come first. In the middle of the sea of people was the circular platform with 2 holograms mimicking ZOEY's and Alonzo's movements. Giant, ghostly doppelgangers towering above the crowd. ZOEY lifted the microphone to her face, and her brain just froze up. She cleared her throat and heard it echo across the amp towers. She watched the giant hologram mirror her movements, saw her own fear in its posture. Then a yellow object in the crowd caught her eye, and she remembered Aviv's text. It was, in fact, a robot. It was 8 feet tall and was actually a walking vending machine, dispensing energy drinks from a cooler on its back, the front branded with a Modo Mojo logo made out of animated lighting. Aviv had disguised himself as an object designed to be easily visible for a quarter mile in any direction. The idiot. A drunk dude in the front row screamed for ZOEY to show her boobs, and for some reason, that's what broke her paralysis. Oh, there we go, said ZOEY into the mic. This guy's asking me to show boobs. People, you can see them anytime you want. If you search my name on any platform, it auto-completes to boobs. One request, specifically search for ZOEY Ashe boobs cans. That's the best clip. I looked really skinny in that one. Laughs and hoots from the crowd. But I know you're not here to see me, so let me get this over quick, she said, back on script. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for not utterly destroying all of this stuff my people have taken months to build for you. A pretty good cheer in response to that. The grin on ZOEY's face in response was genuine. My company sponsors this here festival, she continued, against the advice of our accountants. Trust me, the ticket prices don't come close to covering the damage you crazies do every year, and I intend to continue this tradition until people stop showing up or I run out of money. More cheers, and louder. Jesus, had she actually been nervous about this? They were going to have to drag her off the stage. She wanted to feel like this all the time, forever. She again looked to the yellow energy drink robot suit that Aviv was apparently driving around. It was waving its spindly arms in the air. She wondered if he had bribed the normal vendor to give up the suit, or if he'd just stolen it. "Now," she said, when she sensed the roar had dipped somewhat, "here, with what I've been assured is a totally apolitical message, is candidate for mayor Alonzo Dunn." More cheers, plus a chant Zoe couldn't make out. Probably one of Megaboss Alonzo's campaign slogans. Not that it mattered, people just like to make noise in unison. "Settle down before y'all pull a muscle," said Alonzo, beaming. "She's right. I'm not here to drone on about politics. Even the presence of a stiff like me in a suit like this at a party like yours ought to be against the rules. I'm just here to ask everybody to keep the energy pure, keep the future memories happy, enjoy the unifying magic of the music." A mild cheer from the crowd. For those who knew Alonzo, this wasn't the good stuff. He wasn't playing the hits. But that was the agreed-upon plan. Zoe raised her mic to tell her joke, say thank you, and then walk off. But Alonzo wasn't done. "A moment ago, my opponent took the West Center stage and got that crowd all riled up about cleaning up the city. Then he walked off, and that Christian glam rock band went into their song about washing away the filth. Or one of them. They all kind of sound the same." Hoots of agreement from the crowd. Alonzo calmly stepped over the yellow tape, nearing the edge of the stage, a couple of feet away from the grasping hands below. "Well, if you ask me, the whole world needs a little filth. Let's hear it for the filth!" The reaction from the audience was a roar that seemed to shake the planet in its orbit. Zoe just stood there, not knowing what to do with her hands. Was she supposed to be reacting to this? Smiling? Frowning? Keeping her face neutral? What was her face doing right now? Should she just walk off? Would that be seen as a protest? Alonzo had gone off script, and there were no good options for reeling him in. She figured that running over and slapping the mic from his hand would probably create an unfavorable narrative in the press. "So let me tell you a story," said Alonzo, in a soaring tone like he was about to launch into a sermon. "My great-granddaddy was a blues musician in Chicago, way back in the olden days. And let me tell you right now, the music you're hearing on these stages, it would not exist without that Chicago blues scene. The Chicago blues gave you Chuck Berry, and Chuck gave you the Rolling Stones, and so on and so on. And let me tell you about my great-granddaddy. He died at age 31, stabbed during a fight in a nightclub. If he'd survived that, I suppose he'd have drank himself to death by 40. But let me tell you, his guitar was the voice of God. I've got his albums at home on the original vinyl, and I've never heard a church hymn that made me feel holiness like those chords. See, that's the thing about humans. A lot of time, it's the filth that produces the beauty. So let's hear it from my granddaddy, who never had been born in any kind of white eugenicist's utopian society. And let's hear it for all of us who wouldn't be here if people like Leonidas Damon had their way. Here's to the sons and the daughters of the filth." The cheer was so loud that it watered Zoe's eyes. Some people chucked bottles toward the stage, which were blasted back by pulses of compressed air, as if bouncing off an invisible force field. In Zoe's ear, Will said, "Just stay back. Don't agree or disagree. We're looking for a good moment for you to walk off without it looking like you're storming off in protest." "Now, I know what they say," said Alonzo, whose body seemed to have been taken over by a powerful, mischievous spirit. "They say Alonzo talks a big game about being a man of the people, but you never seen him walk the streets without his security detail. For one, it's no secret I've got enemies. A man doesn't win this much without leaving a trail of losers in his wake. But if you think I'm afraid to jump into this crowd right now, you don't know me." Ravenous cheers. He pointed to a group right at the center of the stage. "You look like you've got strong backs. You ready?" Zoe muttered, "Tell me he's not." There were voices in her ear, Bud and Will and Echo and Andre, all rapidly discussing what was about to happen. Zoe heard no specific instructions for her. "And if these fools drop me," shouted Alonzo, "you know what? That's okay. That won't shake my trust in the people, just these particular people. Here we go." Alonzo crouched on the edge of the stage, then launched himself, twisting in midair to land backside down. The crowd caught him, for the most part, and clumsily carried him around for a bit, and then set him on his feet. He still had his microphone, and, once he gathered himself, said, "Hold on now." He made a show of examining his left bare wrist. "I had a watch. I had a gold Rolex watch. Who's got it?" He allowed for laughter from the crowd. Then, wait, it's on the other arm. Sorry to have accused you." ZOEY had wandered past the yellow safety line again, entranced by Alonzo's suicidal crowd surf. Some guys in the front row were now beckoning her to jump. She raised the mic and said, "Not a chance." This yielded some boos. In her ear, Echo was saying, "Just come back, wave and walk off, smile the whole time." From down among the people, Alonzo said, "Now, come on, if I was her, I wouldn't trust your perverts either. I even felt some of you get handsy with me." This only triggered the crowd to insist even harder, beckoning ZOEY to join them. "No, he's right," said ZOEY. "There's certain parts you're not supposed to touch on a woman without permission. And look at me, those parts are like 60% of my surface area." Laughter, jeers, pleas. The front section of the crowd, with no other entertainment on stage at the moment, had decided they wanted nothing in life more than to get this woman to take the plunge. Everyone was smiling. Most were around her age. Some beefy drunk guys near the front were insisting they'd catch her. A little ways back, the yellow Aviv bot was using his spindly robot arms to beckon her forward. ZOEY heard some female voices calling her name, and noticed a group of women way off to her left, urging her that way, implying that it was a safe spot to jump and avoid getting groped. In her ear, Will said, "ZOEY, do not go into the crowd." She wasn't sure if she had made her decision prior to hearing that or after, but the decision was made nonetheless. She tossed the mic aside and ran toward the group of female fans. The final word she heard in her ear, before she reached the edge, was her mother shouting, "Go backwards so you land with your butt." She tried to obey, flinging herself into the air with abandon, twisting as she went. She landed backward on a bunch of hands and kind of awkwardly rolled off and tumbled to the ground. Then everyone was laughing and helping her up, and ZOEY was thanking them. Her heart was pounding. Echo's voice in her ear said, "Will was heading toward you." "No," replied ZOEY. "Tell him to stay put. I'm fine. Just give me a minute." The crowd's excitement over ZOEY's leap dissipated quickly, as apparently the fun was talking her into it, not the act itself. The stage backdrop was already transforming itself for the next band, and the currents of the crowd began mixing as some wandered off to other stages, and a wave of new fans washed in for the next act. Alonzo was taking some pictures with the supporters, and, in general, seemed to have forgotten about ZOEY entirely. The new fans coming in didn't seem to know or care about her either way. These were people from out of town, for the most part, and the audience, having convinced some local officials to jump off the stage, wasn't in the top 1,000 weirdest things they'd seen over the last 60 hours or so of the festival. She was just part of the crowd. Nobody paid any special attention to her, other than to smile as they passed. It was wonderful. Alonzo's security detail and assistants were jumping down off the stage, pushing their way through, trying to get to the candidate. He made a big show of waving them off. He was just chilling with his constituents. All was well. Finally, Will's voice said, "What's your plan, ZOEY?" "I think I'm gonna hang out with the people and enjoy the concert." There was another pause while Will either exchanged frustrated words with the team over a muted mic or just took a moment to gather himself so he wouldn't start yelling. She thought she may have heard Wu say, "I told you she would do it." "The issue with that," said Will, restraining himself with all his strength, "is that everyone on the team has a role based around all of this playing out in a certain way. If we have to assign someone to track you, and then many people to come extract you if things go wrong, it throws everything off. You said yourself you have a responsibility as a boss to not make everyone's job harder. And you told me that no plan survives contact with the enemy." She actually wasn't sure she'd heard him say that, but it seemed like the kind of thing Will would say. "Things change. I've observed the situation and have decided that I want to spend the concert on this side, with the people. I mean, if the common folk are so dangerous that I can't hang out with them and listen to some music, what society are we even trying to preserve? It sounds to me like the battle is already lost." There was another pause, during which they apparently had another discussion, and decided that Echo was the better intermediary. Zoe, said Echo, the issue isn't that there might be trouble. The issue is that there almost certainly will be. We've talked about this. I'll make my way back to you before that. I'll be fine. I have friends out here. She was heading toward the yellow Modo Mojo energy drink robot that Aviv had hijacked. I'll talk to you later. Before anyone could reply, she pulled out her earpiece and stuffed it in her pocket. The yellow robot had a tinted portal in its chest that Zoe assumed was for the pilot inside to see out. Between this and the drill machine, Zoe had decided that Aviv's one remarkable trait was a resistance to claustrophobia. She got as close to the Aviv bot as she could without it seeming weird. Is that you? Either there was no apparatus for the operator to speak, or Aviv didn't want to give away his identity with his voice. Instead, she got her answer via a text on her phone. Aviv. Nice, right? Only had to pay a teenager a few $100 to let me take his shift. I haven't sold many cans of Modo Mojo so far, though. There's a quota, and I don't want the guy to get yelled at. The robot was rolling through the crowd, and Zoe was kind of walking along with it. The drinks were stored in a refrigerated cylinder on its back that swirled with animated slogans. There was a chute that kind of seemed positioned to make it look like the drinks were being dispensed from the robot's butt. This is awkward. Do people think I'm trying to befriend this vending machine? As they talked, kids were coming up and pulling out cans, the system tracking every purchase, and invisibly charging their accounts. Aviv, maybe they'll think I took your money without dispensing a can, and you're trying to get a refund. Bang on me with your fists, like you're mad. A roar went up around them. The next act had apparently taken the stage. Aviv, follow me. The message scrolling across the drink case on the back switched to a flashing red text. Out of stock. Going to get more. Sorry. The Aviv bot headed toward a row of temporary crowd control barriers marking the thoroughfare that led between the stages. It would take them to the infield campgrounds, with its thousands of tents and hundreds of vendors, all at the feet of the towering beehive in the center. Aviv, it'll look like I'm going back to get restocked. I have something to show you. Do you want to hold hands? He extended one of his spindly yellow robot arms. Zoe slapped it away. I feel ridiculous. Aviv, I'm going to tell you something you'll either find upsetting or liberating. Right here, right now, nobody cares what you do. They made their way to the infield, the trio of east stages now behind them, the 3 west stages on the other side of the campgrounds. In between was a sprawl of filthy tents and rows of blue plastic portable restrooms. Zoe had no idea how anyone got any sleep with a giant beehive looming overhead. The hundreds of vendor drones swooping in and out of the hexagonal ports did, in fact, create an ominous buzz that could be felt in the air, as if the structure was going to split open and unleash an actual swarm of hornets, though the delivery drones were not, as she'd hoped, shaped like big fuzzy bees. As Zoe and the Aviv bot passed by hordes of filthy and partially clothed festival campers, she noticed a small mountain of trash piled up against one of the apparently non-functioning incinerators. She imagined a blinking red dot on that holographic model of the festival grounds, and how that tiny indicator didn't really convey the effect of passing the black cloud of flies swarming around the trash, or the stench. Are we going somewhere in particular? She asked. I'm looking for someone, came the reply on her phone. Who? Aviv. It's a surprise. Am I being lured into an ambush? Aviv. If so, then we both are. Remember earlier when I said I had hoped to have news for you? It's about that. They should be over here, by that pink tent. As they moved closer, they passed another malfunctioning trash can, another reeking mountain of refuse. Aviv. There. See the one in the mask, white tank top. They were close enough to see 4 women milling about near a large pink tent, which was as big and garish as a vendor tent, but was not marked in any way. That usually meant they were dealing in some kind of contraband. Some drugs were allowed to be dealt on the grounds, but only from official sellers. It was too easy to have guys selling mushrooms from plastic bags that did nothing. Still, illegal sellers who'd squirreled away their stock beforehand would come and pitch their tent right on top of the dig and open up for business. A big pink tent like this, though, probably meant sex workers. Only one of the women was wearing a mask, a black germ filter that covered her from the eyes down, the type worn by those who developed a cough or who otherwise were concerned about the spread of airborne diseases, though they were also popular among those who simply preferred not to be tracked down Blink. Zoe noticed this woman also wore sunglasses with hers. The hair above it was cut short, slicked back and buzzed at the sides. I see her. Aviv. Look at her left ankle. We're too far away and it's too dark. From where she stood, all she could verify was that the woman did in fact have an ankle. A new message came through, this time a photo, a close-up of the woman's ankle, apparently taken earlier in the day when the sun was out. She had a thin, red band around it, like a tied length of string. Nope, that wasn't right. It was a tattoo of a red string. I see the tattoo, but I don't know what it means. Aviv, from your phone, can you access the autopsy report on Violet, the first sex worker who went missing? Oh, okay, yeah, I don't need to. This one has the same tattoo. Aviv, Zoe, that's Violet. Before I start the last chapter in this particular video, I want to apologize ahead of time. I'm going to try to edit this best I can in post, but I put this off as long as I could, but I have to read it to be able to finish editing the 5 chapters. But if you hear anything in the background, it's the cicadas. I live in a region in the world where in the U.S. the cicadas is bad, and it's so bad that it's just it's a symphony, a cacophony rather, that's bleeding into my home. So I'm gonna try to make it so you can't hear it. If it ends up coming out too bad in post, you won't even hear this, but I'm gonna try my best to get rid of it. So, Chapter 20. Zoe froze. Lots of people can have the same tattoo. Aviv. It's her. I talked to her. She cut her hair, but it's her. I don't know why she's here, but she's preparing to do something. She has a small bag of equipment she works very hard to keep out of sight. She dug it up this morning. Oh my god, I have to tell my... Zoe rummaged in her pocket for her earpiece. We can't let her leave. It's Zoe Ashe. Zoe wasn't sure who'd said it, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that Violet, or the woman Aviv had insisted was Violet, had heard. She turned in Zoe's direction and decided she did not want to be in the vicinity. Wait, said Zoe as Violet jogged away, casting glances back to see if Zoe was in pursuit. I want to talk to you. That, it appeared, was exactly what the fleeing woman was hoping to avoid. She broke into a run, zigzagging between tents, campers, and trash. Zoe did the same. Stop! Zoe looked back and saw Aviv was rolling after them in the yellow Modo Mojo robot. Some guys were following him, but Zoe wasn't sure if they were participating in the chase or were just trying to get a drink. Violet, apparently seeking out a denser crowd to get lost in, headed for the west stages. She weaved her way through the migration of campers, shuffling out to see the headliner shows, and Zoe did the same in pursuit, bumping through shoulders and elbows. She finally found the earpiece in her pocket and stuck it in place. Can you hear me? There was some rustling on the other end. Then Echo said, We've been tracking you on Blink. Who are you following? That's Violet, the first supposedly dead woman. Zoe had to take a moment to catch her breath. Don't ask me how I know. Tracker, I don't know if I can keep up. She couldn't, it turned out. Violet, and then Zoe, hopped the low barriers to the thoroughfare that led between the west and northwest stages, or the middle and top stages as Zoe pictured the layout map in her head. The flowing migration was dense, but at least it was moving. Zoe waded in and moved as quickly as the crowd would allow, forcing her way in between hips and shoulders, desperately trying to keep Violet in view. A voice said, Zoe! And she turned to see a stranger, a girl who was pointing to her head. She had dark hair and was showing Zoe that she had shaved a stripe in the scalp. Zoe gave her a thumbs up and kept running. They passed between the stages, plunging into the crowds on the west side. The band on Zoe's left was ripping their way through some extremely angry song. Zoe stopped because she had lost track of Violet and, to be frank, was already getting winded. Some annoyed people behind her were saying, Watch it, as the yellow Aviv Moto Mojo beverage mech was rolling up, knocking people aside as gently as it could. ZOEY asked, "Do you see her?" without specifying whom she wanted to answer. "She's worming her way through the crowd," said Will in her ear, heading for the center hologram platform. Well, at least that was easy to spot. The giant holographic version of the stage show was probably visible from orbit. ZOEY made her way in that direction, squeezing through a crowd so dense and tense that it was starting to trigger her anxiety, that feeling like there wasn't enough air for everyone to breathe. Will said, "She's stolen a hat, a gray beanie, and she's putting it on. She's found some kind of shirt on the ground. Looks like she's assembling a disguise." "Dark blue flannel," added Echo. "Got it," replied ZOEY. She now had a stitch in her side. Plus, there was a throbbing pain in the leg she'd broken not too long ago. God, she played basketball in high school, and now she felt like she was going to die because she jogged across like half a mile of music festival. In her ear, Echo said, "Are you all right?" "No, I apparently have the athleticism of a 60-year-old woman." "Violet has got installed near the hologram platform. The crowds are really dense there." The platform was just ahead, at the moment displaying four massive giants playing a power ballad ZOEY recognized called Mommy's Chains. It was written from the point of view of a small child who watches their mother get beaten to death in an alley by a gang of muggers looking to steal her jewelry, only for them to realize afterward that her gold chains are cheap fakes, and tossing them to the blood-stained concrete in disdain. The child screams for bystanders to do something, but they just walk past. The song's chorus was the lead singer shrieking, why won't you stop them? Why won't you stop them? Look, her blood is on their hands." The crowd was singing along, bouncing with the drums, whipped into a rage about these fictional villains, their fictional victim, and her fictional traumatized child. At this point, they weren't getting out of ZOEY's way because there was no place for them to go, just bodies and more bodies. In her ear, Andre said, "Hey, are you doing that? Or rather, your guy?" "Doing what?" It quickly became apparent. The hologram of the band was glitching out, blinking and distorting, though the actual band on stage behind them was continuing to play uninterrupted. "The hologram? No. Well, I don't think so." ZOEY turned and banged on Aviv's robot suit with her fist. "Hey, are you doing this?" Aviv. "No." Then, as if anticipating her skepticism, "I promise, I'd say so if it was me." "It's not us," said ZOEY to the suits in her ear. "Unless we're doing it on accident." Will said, "It's being hacked, but not remotely. Somebody has to be there at the platform patching into the panel. Do you have any view of that? Is it Violet?" "I can't see anything. There's like 100 layers of people between us and the platform." As she spoke, the hologram vanished entirely. The image then reappeared as a jumbled blob and rearranged itself, coalescing into the shape of a panicked young woman in filthy underwear, bleeding from a head wound, and trying to free her hands from what looked like leather straps. It was poor quality, the kind of wavy, glitchy hologram you get when recording from a phone in low light. ZOEY's first thought was that this was the work of the band. They just wrapped up a song about a victimized woman, now here she was. But then ZOEY recognized the face. It was, of course, Rose, the third missing sex worker. "Please!" cried hologram Rose, her quivering voice emitting from amp towers across the grounds. "Please, can anyone hear me?" The band had apparently pieced together what was happening and stopped playing. The lead singer yelled, "Everybody, cool it! This is not part of the show! What is this?" "Please!" cried the shimmering figure towering over the crowd. "I don't know if anyone is seeing this. I can't tell if I'm getting a signal. I don't have time. He's going to come back. Please listen. My name is Rose. I worked at Chalet at the mall. I'm locked in this place. There are no windows. The walls are metal, and they're like ribbed or something, like one of those shipping containers. I don't know where this is. I feel vibrations. Maybe there's some machinery around. I don't know. I don't know. It could be a construction site." She stopped, whipping her head around like she'd heard a noise. The crowd around ZOEY and the Aviv bot had fallen dead silent. Some were worried about the endangered woman. Others still weren't convinced this wasn't a staged drama that had been arranged as part of the festival. "The man who took me," continued the hologram. I don't know his name, but he paid for this. He paid to kidnap me. He paid to keep me, to kill me. And there will be others. Please, my phone is dying. I don't even know if this is..." The hologram went dark, leaving the platform empty. In Zoe's ear, Will's voice said, "Yeah, it's Violet." "No," replied Zoe. "That's Rose." "I'm saying the hologram was uploaded by Violet. That's why she was here. That's what she was waiting to do when you spotted her. There's a maintenance panel. She knew where it was, how to unlock it, and how to reprogram it." "But why?" "It would be nice if we could ask her that. But she's heading out of the festival now, toward the back fence, and... yeah, it looks like she has a getaway ride waiting for her back there. A Vespa." "Where is she now? Where exactly?" "You won't catch her. Instead, you need to head toward the platform." Zoe started heading that way without asking for a reason. The hologram platform was a disc sitting maybe 15 feet off the ground. It looked like a landed UFO that was big enough to hold, say, 500 aliens inside, with comfortable legroom. It was balanced on a single thick leg in the center, specifically designed so it would be all but impossible to climb on it, so Zoe only saw a dozen or so people sitting up there. Will said, "There's a maintenance panel on the ground covered by a heavy metal door that should have been impossible to open." "You're sending me to fix your stupid hologram?" "We're sending you to see if she left a drive or something behind that we can grab and trace back to somebody. Walk forward about 30 paces. Zoe actually didn't need Will's directions. About, 30 paces ahead of her was Margaret Mole in her trench coat and red hat, using her folded umbrella like a cane. She was kneeling over an open panel, examining it with the light emitting from her red-hatted camera drone. Zoe said, "Somebody beat us here." "What?" "The amateur detective who accosted me earlier today. And the old woman." Faintly in her ear, Zoe heard Andre say, "She's only 59. Zoe's phone chimed with a message she assumed was from Aviv, but she didn't check it. She was approaching Margaret, shouldering past the few people who'd chosen to enjoy the festival from under the platform, including several who were curled up under there, either asleep or passed out. Margaret made eye contact with her, and Zoe started to ask what she'd found. "Hey!" yelled Margaret. "Grab her! Someone grab that woman! That's Zoe Ashe!" Zoe was so startled by this that she didn't react at first. What?" "You need to get out of there," said Echo in her ear. "Any direction, as fast as you can." A random drunk guy grabbed Zoe by the jacket, though he seemed to have no idea why he was doing it. "Does she steal something from you?" the drunk asked Margaret, who was hobbling her way toward them. "Where is she?" Margaret asked, shouting to be heard over the crowd. "Where's Rose?" "I don't know," replied Zoe, struggling to free herself from the drunk, who had, it turned out, incredible grip strength. "Let's figure it out together." Back on the stage, the band's lead singer seemed to be leading the crowd in a prayer for the missing woman. The Aviv bot rolled up. A frustrated girl was trying to get it to dispense a drink for her. "Who is he?" Margaret asked. "Who's who?" "The psycho you sold her to." "We didn't!" screamed Zoe. "And in fact, I don't even think she's being held captive. The first one who got taken, whose mutilated body was sprayed across the buildings downtown, she was just here. She ran away. This is a stunt. All of it." Several onlookers had gathered around now, apparently searching for entertainment since the concert was, at the moment, on hold. Another text came in and Zoe pulled out her phone. Immediately, a bystander wrenched it from her hand. "Hey, give that back!" "She's been messaging somebody," said the kid who'd taken the phone, gleefully inserting himself into the drama. "Who is Aviv?" "That," said Margaret, "is the man who tried to kill Leonidas Damon at the debate." The lack of recognition on the face of the phone thief told Zoe that he had no idea who Leonidas Damon was, or why he was debating, or why someone would try to kill him, or if he'd even heard the old woman correctly. All he knew was that this all seemed very dramatic and important, and he definitely wanted to be part of it. Zoe yelled, "Everybody calm down! This is all a misunderstanding!" While she was speaking, the band had apparently decided to continue with the concert, tearing into their next song, Burn It All. The vocalist howled, "They wear the teeth of the saints like people around their necks. The skin of the innocent turned to shoe leather. Their layers kept tainted, blighted girls bound for sex. The sins of men, sure they're so clever. Burn it all, burn it all. We're coming to burn it all down, times 12. Oddly enough, the song didn't seem to bring a calming energy to the situation. The crowd was bouncing again, the music rumbling through the earth at Zoe's feet. It seemed clear that no meaningful conversation was possible at this point. "What do the messages say?" shouted Margaret to the kid who'd stolen Zoe's phone. "The last one says, 'Climb on.'" No one had any context for what that could mean, including Zoe. Then she turned to the yellow Aviv bot, which beckoned to her with its spindly arms. She ran and jumped onto its back. The robot took off through the crowd, going way faster than Zoe would have thought possible, or preferred. People were diving out of the way, though at least they could see it coming. The Aviv bot was heading away from the stage, meeting everyone in the crowd face first. "Where are you going?" shouted Zoe, though she had no idea if Aviv could hear her from inside the robot and had no means to see his reply if he texted one. In her ear, she heard Will say, "What is she doing?" to someone else. Zoe sensed she was being followed by multiple angry pursuers, though it was a little hard to tell because people were getting angry everywhere. Burn It All had reached the midpoint's 3-minute-long guitar solo, during which the entire stage was engulfed in holographic fire. She and Aviv were rolling past one of the amp towers, and fans were climbing up, yanking off hunks of paneling and peeling plastic shielding from around the poles. The band blasted into the next verse. "We'll rip down their mansions and splash the gasoline. They'll cry and they will beg, promise to reform. We'll flick down the matches and laugh at the screams. They'll fry in our pit, condemned by the unborn." The harvested plastic shielding made for convenient clubs, and members of the audience were indiscriminately smacking each other with them. From the back of her yellow robot steed, Zoe turned to see the infield campgrounds, now visible between the stages. Something in there was on fire. Several things, in fact. The problem, as Zoe vividly remembered from the hologram model the festival set up, was that they were heading toward the north gate, either because that's where Violet had gone, or because Aviv was trying to get them out of the developing riot, or both. But leading to the north gate was also the thoroughfare that separated the east and west crowds, as each side was stoked into a frenzy. This is where they would clash, and cooler heads, Zoe thought, would almost certainly not prevail. She and Aviv would be rolling right through a war zone. Fortunately, the song Burn It All had run its course, ending with the lead guitarist setting his guitar on fire and smashing it on stage. Unfortunately, he was quickly tossed a new guitar and then launched into another song called No One Will Mark Their Graves. After a haunting intro, the singer crooned, "One day a child with a dirty smile will dig happily in the ground, and she'll say, 'Mommy, look what I have found. Strange white stones of all shapes and sizes, thousands more than I can count.' Mommy will say, 'Those are the bones of the devil's minions, the liars and the fornicators, the abortionists and thieves. Now they lie beneath our golden streets, forgotten like discarded tumors, so we could begin again.'" Then the guitar kicked in for the chorus, and the energy rippled through the crowd like a wave. "When justice comes, they will fall like grass, and no one will mark their graves. No one will mark their graves. I said, no one will mark their graves." The crowd control barriers along the path north had been knocked over and were being torn apart. The thin, vertical bars instantly turned into weapons. Revelers were pouring across from west to east and becoming rioters in the process, smacking each other with pieces at the festival they'd salvaged. Zoe and Aviv were rolling right into the flashpoint of the chaos, and Zoe noted someone had already set fire to one of the piles of overflowing garbage from the malfunctioning trash cans. A young man, who seemed simultaneously enraged and enraptured, saw Zoe riding on the vending bot and decided it looked like fun, so he jumped on, and immediately after, so did two of his friends. Zoe yelled at them to get off, as if that demand would make sense in any possible context. The weight stalled the Aviv bot entirely. Then the guys all started rocking it until it toppled over, flinging Zoe to the ground in the process. She crawled over and yelled at the robot, asking if it was okay, which probably made the other rioters think she was more drunk than any of them. They kicked and bashed at the cooler on its back, where the energy drinks were stored. "Be careful!" she yelled. "There's a guy in there!" "Stop her!" came a voice from behind. Zoe turned to find Margaret Mole rolling toward them on an electric mobility scooter. No one was trying to jump on board her thing. The Aviv bot used his robot arms to right himself, knocking a few of the drink looters aside. Margaret rolled to a stop. "Where are you going, dear?" asked Margaret. "Well, for one," replied Zoe, shouting to be heard over the chaos, "I'm getting out of the riot." She got to her feet, trying to calculate what exactly would happen if she tried to jump back on Aviv and take off again. Every possible outcome was some combination of tragic and stupid. "Then that's what we shall do," said Margaret, as loudly as she could manage. "You and I are going to go somewhere we can talk, and you are going to tell me what I need to know. As soon as that poor woman is found and brought home safe, well, we'll work out what needs to be done after that." She held up a pair of thick black bracelets. They were incapacitation cuffs that, in addition to binding the wrists, could subject the victim to anything from paralysis to extreme pain, depending on what features Margaret had sprung for. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "Lady, you are not the police, and you are not arresting me." "I am not going to give you the chance to pull out some gadget and make a break for it." "And I'm definitely not letting you shackle me in the middle of a massive crowd that wants to tear me to pieces." There were flailing, shouting rioters all around them, but a specific pack of angry dudes had arrived in Margaret's wake. Well, some of them were angry. Some seemed amused. It seemed half of them still weren't sure if this was real or some kind of live role-play thing for Blink or what. The important thing was that they intended to proceed in the same manner regardless. Back on the stage, the band had exploded into a new song, one Zoe was unfamiliar with. The chorus was something about the fall of Babylon, and though she couldn't make out specific words, she felt like she pretty much had the idea at this point. Margaret made a move toward Zoe, who stepped back. The yellow Aviv robot quickly rolled over to get in between Zoe and the advancing woman. Margaret tried to step around it, and Aviv reached out to grab her with one of the rudimentary, designed only to be energy drink claws. The detective jerked away and raised her umbrella. She pulled at the handle, and out from it emerged a narrow blade, a glint of blue electricity flashing along its length. She whipped it at the Aviv bot, through the Aviv bot. Sparks flew. A glowing wound of molten plastic had formed across the robot's torso. The animated logos went dark, and its spindly arms went limp. It held like that for a moment. And then the top half of the robot slid off and tumbled to the dirt. The rioters around them cheered the latest destruction. Zoe screamed. She rushed over to the severed upper half of the robot on the ground, which made no sense, because if half of Aviv was in there, then it wasn't like she could render aid. Finding nothing inside, she jumped up to look into the remaining lower section of the yellow vending bot, praying she'd find Aviv crouched down below, where his costume had gotten sliced in half. It was empty. Just smoldering bundles of severed wire, and a few cables spurting hydraulic fluid. Aviv was not inside, and, presumably, never had been. A guy near Zoe said, "Dude, was that your robot or something?" Margaret sheathed her blade, then lunged over and snatched Zoe by the elbow. She tried to slap one cuff around Zoe's left wrist before Zoe yanked it away. "No, we're not doing this. My people are on their way. You know they are. My bodyguard and all the rest. I don't want to hurt you." "Your people are bogged down with the riots," said Margaret, "and will continue to be for some time, unless they intend on landing a helicopter in the middle of the crowd. So allow me to return the sentiment. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if it means saving Rose. The old woman started to point her umbrella. Zoe shoved Margaret and turned to make a run for it, imagining a slapstick chase in which she would have to run from an old woman pursuing on a mobility scooter. Zoe made it about 2 steps before slamming into a wall of men who latched onto her, a combination of guys who'd been following the drama, and probably some new ones who just saw the young woman in a leather jacket assault an old lady. "Are you okay?" one of them yelled to Margaret. "What's going on?" Margaret made some attempt at an explanation, but just then another roar went up in the distance. In the infield, the beehive was now aflame. The light of that blaze would likely be visible for miles, held aloft like a torch in the center of the madness. And with that, it seemed a silent message had gone out to the frenzied crowd. There was no turning back. The men holding on to Zoe's arms thus didn't need to hear Margaret's story. What they knew was that the festival masses had collectively decided to tear apart the venue, and that Zoe was a part of the venue somehow. Not one way or another, she represented what it stood for. A voice in her earpiece was offering urgent instructions, but Zoe was unable to focus. The rioters had swallowed her up, and there was a horrific moment when the drunken riot hive mind was trying to decide exactly what to do with her. After a shouted, slurred debate that Zoe could in no way understand, a decision was made to drag her off in one direction. Toward what, she didn't know. Margaret followed, insisting they turn Zoe over to her, trying to explain she was conducting a citizen's arrest. But the rioters weren't in this for justice. They were in it for fun, and Zoe thought it was kind of weird that the old woman hadn't picked up on that by now. Then, Zoe saw where they were dragging her, and tried to put her heels down, to skid herself to a stop. There's a kind of gleeful creativity that manifests in riots, where every individual member feels like, for the first time in their lives, they're acting with impunity, the way calories don't count on vacation. They suddenly have an audience cheering every cruel impulse, so it becomes a rapid-fire contest to see who can come up with the best/worst idea. As such, they were hauling Zoe toward the row of portable toilets, several of which had been overturned in the riot, and were spilling raw sewage and blue chemicals into the dirt. She thrashed to get away from them, but that just triggered laughter. Her thrashing was part of the game they were playing, the best part. It wouldn't be fun if she wanted to go into the swamp of human urine, vomit, and feces. There was a commotion from behind her, and from that direction came approaching lights and a flurry of bodies lunging out of the way. A black motorcycle skidded to a stop, and Dee Dee leaped off, her yellow eyes glowing. Let go of her. The men stopped dragging Zoe, but did not let her go. This was a riot. They were surrounded by a swirling mass of humanity in the act of shouting and breaking things, under the soundtrack of a live band singing a song about pulling down the towers of the wicked. Hadn't this woman in the gleaming black costume gotten the memo? This was the hour of chaos. Dee Dee approached, her hands at her sides, fingers extended and immobile. Margaret shuffled up behind her. "I'm afraid you'll have to wait in line," said the old woman. "Whoever you are." The detective aimed her umbrella. Dee Dee spun on her. "Who the hell are you?" "I am just a citizen looking to see that justice is done. I don't want to hurt you, young lady, but I do have the means, and I will not leave here without Miss Ashe in my custody." Ignoring her, Dee Dee gestured to Zoe with her stiff, outstretched fingers. "Come on." The men holding on to Zoe still didn't let go. Margaret stepped forward, brandishing the umbrella. "This is your final warning. Don't make me—" Dee Dee raised one hand and swept it through the air, delivering a backhand slap that knocked Margaret to the ground. She spun back toward Zoe's captors. Let her go. This time, they seemed too stunned to do it. Dee Dee stepped forward and backhanded a dude hard enough that he kind of flipped in midair and landed on his face. Without waiting to see if this changed the rest of the captors' minds, she backhanded another guy, and another, sending them flailing into the dirt. Now free, Zoe and Dee Dee pushed toward Dee Dee's motorcycle. Dee Dee slapping a path through the crowd. Whap, whap, whap. Dee Dee jumped onto her motorcycle, and Zoe climbed on the back, hanging on for dear life and wondering how Dee Dee steered the thing with her non-working hands. It turned out it just steered itself. They flew through the riot and out the north gate, Dee Dee occasionally reaching out with her free hands and slapping fools along the way.